The first thing I felt was the pain. It was not a memory. It was a physical fact. A spike of hot metal driving from the base of my skull straight through my right eye. I jolted upright on the thin mattress, a gasp catching in my throat. My hand flew to my head. Nothing. Smooth skin. No blood. But I could still feel it. The ghost of the bullet. The final, searing agony before the black. Outside my window, the city of Seattle hummed with life. A car horn blared. Distant sirens wailed a familiar song. The cheap curtains did little to block the morning light. My room smelled of stale coffee and code. It was my room, my life, the one I had died in. 7 days. The number was not a thought. It was a brand on the inside of my eyelids. 7 days until the power grid failed. 7 days until the taps ran dry. 7 days until the red meteors streaked across the sky and the system went live. My heart hammered against my ribs, a panicked drumbeat. I remembered the thirst, a physical, clawing memory of a dry throat and cracked lips, of fighting a neighbor for a muddy puddle of water. I remembered the TV, the smiling faces of news anchors promising everything was under control, while my phone screen showed grainy videos of people tearing each other apart in the streets. Most people had hesitated, caught between official lies and terrible truths. That hesitation was a death sentence. I swung my legs off the bed. The floor was cold against my bare feet. My movements felt stiff, disconnected. I was a ghost piloting a body that didn't belong to me anymore. My eyes scanned the cramped room. A laptop on a cluttered desk. A pile of clothes on a chair. A poster for a strategy game, Age of Hegemony, pinned to the wall. I had been good at that game. It had taught me about resource management and ruthlessness. It was a child's game compared to what was coming. The first step was survival. Then, power. The knowledge I held, the beta tester's privilege, was useless without resources. I needed to move, now. My fingers trembled as I picked up a pen. The paper was a takeout menu. I flipped it over. Credit cards. Max out. Payday loan apps. All of them. Mortgage mom's house. Pay back later. Sell the bike. The list was manic, the handwriting jagged. It was the plan of a madman. But I was the sanest person on the planet. I grabbed my phone. The screen's glare was a physical blow. One by one, I opened the banking apps. My credit limit was laughably small. It wouldn't be enough. The loan apps were next. Tap, confirm, agree to the predatory interest rates. The numbers didn't matter. In 7 days, the global financial system would be a historical footnote. A green bar filled. $5,000 approved. Another. $7,500 approved. The money flooded into my account. It was just data on a screen, but it was the ammunition I needed. My breath came in short, sharp bursts. I remembered what it felt like to starve. The hollow ache in the gut that turned into a fire, consuming you from the inside. Never again. The final item on the list was the hardest. My parents' house. The only real thing they owned. My thumb hovered over their contact number. A wave of something hot and bitter rose in my throat. I remembered their faces in my last life, gaunt and terrified, before a horde of goblins had. I shut my eyes. The image dissolved. I couldn't save them. Not yet. I had to be strong enough first. I made the call to a predatory mortgage broker I'd found online. The conversation was a blur of numbers and legal jargon. I agreed to everything. The money would be wired within a day. With a suitcase full of dirty laundry and a bank account swelling with soon-to-be worthless currency, I left my apartment. The first stop was the office. A final, necessary act of severance. The office air was a recycled, climate-controlled lie. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sterile glow on rows of gray cubicles. Keyboards clattered like nervous insects. People moved with a slow, deliberate pace of the soon-to-be dead. They worried about KPIs, about deadlines, about what Mr. Peterson would say in the morning meeting. I saw him through his glass-walled office, his face red as he berated some junior programmer. Mr. Peterson, a petty tyrant who stole my code and passed it off as his own management skill. In my first life, I had hated him. Now, I felt nothing. It was like looking at a piece of furniture. A piece of furniture that would be something's meal in a week. I walked toward his office. My footsteps were silent on the industrial carpet. A few of my colleagues looked up, their faces showing mild curiosity. Sarah from accounting offered a weak smile. I did not return it. I remembered finding her body in the office kitchen, half-eaten. I didn't knock. I pushed the door open. Peterson looked up, his tirade cut short. Annoyance flashed in his eyes. "What is it, Alex?" "I'm busy." I didn't answer. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single sheet of paper. My resignation letter, written on the back of the same takeout menu. I walked to his desk and dropped it. The paper landed on his keyboard with a soft thud. He stared at it, then at me. "What is this? A joke?" "I quit," I said. My voice was flat, devoid of emotion. It felt like someone else was speaking. He laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "You can't quit. You have the Henderson project due Friday. You think you can just walk out of here?" I looked past him, through the glass wall, at the faces of the other employees. They were all staring now. A silent audience to a play they didn't understand. I looked back at Peterson. His face was a mask of smug authority. A fly buzzing before a hurricane. "Worry about yourself," I said, my voice low. "The likes of you, just wait for the end." I turned and walked out. I didn't look back. I could feel his rage, his confusion, radiating behind me like heat. I heard him shouting my name. The words were meaningless noise. I walked through the silent rows of cubicles, past the shocked faces. They looked at me as if I had lost my mind. I looked at them and saw only walking corpses. The last stop was my apartment building. I had to settle things with my landlady, Mrs. Gable, a woman who complained about a water stain on the ceiling while charging a fortune for a room the size of a closet. I found her in the lobby, sorting mail. She saw me with my suitcase and her face soured. "Moving out, Alex? You know you have to give 30 days notice. Your security deposit is forfeit." Her voice was a smug whine. I didn't argue. I unzipped a side pocket of my suitcase. Inside was a thick stack of cash from an ATM withdrawal. 2 months' rent. I pulled it out. The crisp bills felt alien in my hand. "Here," I said. I didn't hand it to her. I threw it. The bundle of cash hit the grimy linoleum floor with a deadened slap. The paper band broke, and $100 bills scattered around her orthopedic shoes. Her eyes went wide. For a second, greed warred with indignation on her face. Greed won. "This dump," I said, my voice as cold as the floor tiles. "You couldn't pay me to stay here." I zipped up my suitcase and walked out the front door, leaving her on her hands and knees, snatching up the money. Her mumbled curses were a fitting farewell to the life I was leaving behind. Later that evening, in a nondescript motel room across town, I turned on the TV. A news anchor with perfect teeth was talking about an upcoming astronomical event. Scientists are assuring the public that the meteor shower, dubbed the Crimson Cascade, for its unusual color, poses no threat and will provide a spectacular, once-in-a-lifetime light show for skygazers this Friday night. A smile touched my lips. It was a strange, unfamiliar sensation. A pulling of muscles that had forgotten how. I looked out the motel window. The city lights sparkled, a vast, glittering diamond of civilization. They thought it was beautiful. They didn't see the truth. It wasn't a light show. It was a countdown timer. 7 days. My suitcase, filled with cash, sat at my feet. It was my war chest. My target was already in my mind. Heaven's Gate Estates, a walled-off, high-end community in the suburbs. High walls, low population density, private security. An ideal fortress. The first step was complete. I had the capital. Now, the race against time began. I had to turn this worthless paper into steel, food, and medicine. I had to get to my fortress. I had to be ready for the night the sky bled red. My blood was cold in my veins, but my mind was a furnace. The game was about to begin, and this time, I wouldn't be the one to die screaming in the dark. The motel room was a memory. The city was a grid I moved through, not a place I lived in. My new home was concrete and corrugated steel. 5 commercial warehouses, rented under a shell corporation I'd formed online in 20 minutes. They stood in a row in an industrial park south of the city, a place of cracked asphalt and chain-link fences. A place no one looked at twice. T-5 days. I stood at the open roll-up door of Warehouse 1. The air smelled of diesel exhaust and stale rainwater. Inside, the space was vast. The fluorescent lights high overhead hummed, casting long shadows from the mountains I was building. Pallets of rice, stacked 10 feet high. A wall of canned beans and dried meat. A fortress of bottled water. I ran a hand over the tight plastic shrink wrap. It was real, solid, not data on a screen. The foreman from the food distributor, a heavy man named Davis, wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. His truck was idling at the loading dock, its engine a low rumble. "That's the last of it, Mr. Carter," he said. His tone was a mix of respect and confusion. The amount of cash I'd paid him had bought the respect. The size of the order had bought the confusion. "You stocking up for a restaurant chain?" "Something like that," I said. My voice was level. I handed him the final bundle of cash. He counted it quickly, his thumb and forefinger moving with practiced ease. He didn't care what my reasons were. Money was money. I watched his truck pull away, its red taillights disappearing into the gray morning. I turned back to my hoard. This was just Warehouse 1. Food and water. Warehouse 2 held medical supplies. Boxes of antibiotics, painkillers, trauma kits, saline drips. I'd dealt with a medical supply liquidator, a man with cold eyes who asked no questions about why a private citizen needed enough gauze to pack the wounds of a small army. Warehouse 3 was for fuel. Dozens of 55-gallon drums of diesel and gasoline, lined up in neat, silent rows. The fire hazard was a calculated risk. Warehouses 4 and 5 were still mostly bare, waiting for steel. On the small radio I kept on a folding table, a voice droned on. A government spokesman: "We urge citizens to remain calm. Reports of unusual supply chain activity are being exaggerated. Our national infrastructure is robust and there is no need for panic buying." I picked up a bottle of water and twisted the cap. The plastic cracked. The sound was sharp in the cavernous space. I drank. The water was cool. It tasted like survival. They were telling the herd not to stampede, right before opening the gate to the slaughterhouse. The next 2 days were a blur of motion. White, unmarked panel vans and flatbed trucks arrived and left. My bank account bled money, but my warehouses grew pregnant with resources. Rolls of concertina wire, sharp as 1,000 razors. Stacks of steel plating. Crates of tools. I directed the drivers and the forklift operators with few words. Pointing. A nod. They worked. I paid them. They left. It was a simple, clean machine. During a break, I sat on a crate and checked my phone. My old life flickered on the screen. An email from my former company. A mass memo from our. It mentioned abrupt personnel changes and project restructuring following my departure. I pictured Peterson's red, angry face trying to explain why his star project was suddenly dead in the water. I deleted the email without reading the rest. It was irrelevant data. Then I saw it, a news article about a local shipping giant, Swift Wind Logistics. Their stock had taken a minor hit after announcing a major system-wide software update scheduled for 2 days from now. T-2 days. The article quoted their CTO. A seamless transition to a next-generation logistics platform. I knew what it really was. A catastrophic failure. A bug in the code that would, for a period of about 8 hours, duplicate every single outgoing order from their main Western hub. They would bill for one, but the automated system would dispatch two. A gift from the indifferent gods of shoddy programming. I had found it by accident in the beta. A bug that had made a few early players into kings. This was the cornerstone of my plan. Food and fuel were survival. But wealth, true power in the world to come, was technology and high-value materials. Things I couldn't buy in bulk with cash without raising alarms. I spent the next 36 hours on a new laptop, the screen a stark white light in the dim warehouse office. I didn't sleep. I drank water and ate beef jerky from a pack on the desk. My fingers moved across the keyboard, a steady, rhythmic clicking. I built a dozen fake customer profiles, each with a different prepaid credit card and a delivery address routed to one of my warehouses. The shopping list was precise. Not bulk goods. Finesse items. High-capacity solar panels from Germany. Industrial-grade water purification systems. Advanced radio communication gear. Night vision optics. Computer components, processors, memory, high-end graphics cards by the case. Boxes of ammunition precursors, brass, primers, smokeless powder. And medicine, not just antibiotics but rare antivirals, chemotherapy drugs, advanced coagulants. In the coming world, a single dose of some of these would be worth more than a mansion. Each order was carefully calculated to stay just under the threshold that would trigger a manual review. Dozens of small, expensive streams flowing into one big river. My river. While I worked, the world outside continued its slow, final dance. I saw it on the news feeds. People arguing about sports, celebrities getting divorced, politicians promising a brighter future. Laughter, traffic, life. It all seemed very loud and distant, like a party in a neighboring house that I had no intention of attending. T-2 days, the morning of the Swift Wind update. The system was set to go live at 8 a.m. Pacific time. At 7:55, I had all the shopping carts loaded. All the payment information entered. A fortune in digital currency, poised on a knife's edge. My heart didn't beat faster. My hands were steady. This wasn't a gamble, it was a physics equation. I had seen the answer. The clock on my laptop screen ticked to 8 o'clock. I executed the scripts. One after another, the orders fired off. Click, click, click. My bank accounts drained. The numbers fell, red and alarming. On the other side of the internet, servers word. Code executed, and a single, critical flaw in the logic, a forgotten, if, then, statement, a misplaced semicolon, did its work. For each order I placed, 2 manifests were created in SwiftWind's automated dispatch system. 2 sets of instructions sent to robotic arms in a warehouse across the state. 2 routing labels printed, 2 trucks assigned. I paid for 1, the system gave me 2. I leaned back in the cheap folding chair. The warehouse was silent except for the low hum of the lights. It was done, the largest single transfer of wealth in my life, conducted in utter silence, based on a secret only I knew. I didn't smile, I felt a cold sense of rightness. The world was a machine, and I had just asserted my control over one of its gears. The first truck arrived just after noon, a large Swift Wind semi. The driver, a young woman with a tired face, handed me a tablet. Delivery for Warehouse 4, she said. Sign here. I scrawled a name on the screen. The back of the truck rolled up, revealing pallets of sleek, black solar panels and heavy crates marked with biohazard symbols, the advanced medical supplies. My crew of day laborers, hired for cash that morning, got to work with pallet jacks, moving the goods into the cool dark of the warehouse. An hour later, as they were finishing, a second Swift Wind truck pulled up. Identical to the first, the driver, an older man this time, got out, looking at his manifest, then at the other truck, then at me. Got a delivery for Warehouse 4, he said, a note of confusion in his voice. Looks like you're already getting one. I feigned a mild curiosity. Weird, let me see the paperwork. He handed me his tablet. The manifest was identical to the first. Same order number, same contents. I shrugged. System must have split the order. Happens sometimes. If the paperwork says it comes here, then bring it in. He grunted, satisfied with the simple explanation, and went to open his trailer. My men looked at me. I just nodded. They went back to work, unloading a second, identical shipment of solar panels and medical supplies. A perfect copy. I stood by the door, watching them work. The mountain of resources grew. The foundation of my fortress was being laid, not with stone, but with medicine that would cure the dying and technology that would light the dark. The sky outside was overcast. The air was heavy. The final countdown had begun. They didn't know it, but every tick of the clock was a nail in their world's coffin. And I was holding the hammer. The engine of the Freightliner rumbled, a low thrum against my feet. Outside the armored windshield, the sky had begun to bleed. Thin, red streaks tore through the gray overcast, like scratches on a photograph. It was happening, right on schedule. I didn't look at it. I watched the road. The entrance to Paradise Cove was just ahead. A wrought iron gate, flanked by stone pillars. It was open. It wouldn't be for long. My phone, mounted on the dash, died. The GPS signal vanished. The radio broadcast I'd been listening to, some politician promising stability, dissolved into a hiss of static. Then, silence. The engine was the only sound. I guided the truck through the gate. The streets inside were clean, lined with manicured lawns and houses the size of small hotels. No people, not yet. Then it appeared in my vision. Not on a screen, in my eyes. A pane of translucent blue light, hovering. Welcome to the God's survival game. Commencing stage 1, the initial chaos. Good luck, player. The text was sharp. Clinical. I blinked. It remained. I knew it would. I'd seen it before. The air outside the truck changed. A low hum vibrated through the metal frame, a sound that felt like it was coming from inside my own skull. Then, the first scream. It was distant but clear. A woman's voice, ripped short. It was followed by a car alarm, then another. A chorus of panic. My old life, the one in the cramped apartment with peeling paint and judgmental neighbors, was over. Peterson, my old boss. The condescending landlady, their faces were blurry images. Data I no longer needed. The warehouses I had rented were now just empty concrete boxes. Everything of value, every pallet of food, every drum of fuel, every weapon and box of medicine, had been swallowed the moment the blue screen appeared. Swallowed by a silent command in my mind. A new icon had appeared in the bottom right of my vision. A simple black square, the infinite backpack, my true warehouse. I pulled the truck onto the cobblestone driveway of the largest house on the crescent. A 3-story monster of glass and white stone, with a 4-car garage and a view of the entire valley. The engine died with a final cough as I turned the key. The silence that followed was heavy. A dog started barking somewhere down the street. It ended with a wet, tearing sound. I pushed the heavy truck door open. The air smelled of ozone and something else. Something sweet and metallic. I got out. My footfalls were loud on the stone. From behind the house next door, a figure stumbled into view. A man in a jogging suit. His head was lolling on his neck at a bad angle. His skin was the color of old putty. He saw me, his jaw unhinged, and a low moan pushed past gray lips. Zombie, level 1, pathetic. Another staggered out from a manicured hedge. Then 3 more from around the corner of the house. 10 of them. They moved slowly, a shambling tide of decay converging on my position. I didn't reach for the handgun on my hip. Too noisy. Instead, I flexed the fingers of my right hand. A cold weight settled into my palm. A dagger, forged of what looked like solidified moonlight, materialized from thin air. The crescent fang, the first one, reached me. It lunged, clumsy and slow. I stepped inside its reach. The dagger felt like an extension of my arm. A single, clean movement. I didn't slice. I pushed the tip into the creature's eye socket. There was a soft crunch. The blade sank to the hilt. Black, tar-like fluid wept from the wound. I pulled it free as the body dropped. It didn't twitch. The second one grabbed for my shoulder. I ducked under its arm, the dagger drawing a silver arc across its throat. The cut was deep. No blood sprayed. The wound gaped open, showing dark, dead tissue beneath. It gurgled and fell. The others closed in. I moved between them, a blur of precise, economical motion. Pierce the temple. Sever the spine at the neck. A thrust through an open mouth. Each movement was a solution to a simple problem. They were just obstacles. Malfunctioning code. The last one, a woman in a tennis skirt, sank to its knees, its head half severed. It clawed at the air for a moment, then collapsed onto the pristine driveway. I stood among the bodies. The dagger in my hand dissolved back into nothing. My breathing was even. My heart rate was steady. Another blue screen. First blood achievement unlocked. 10 kills streak achieved. Beta tester exclusive divine skill unlocked. Monarch's domain, level 1. I felt it, a change in the space around me. A sphere of influence, 10 meters in radius, centered on me. It was invisible, but I could feel its boundary like a change in air pressure. Inside it, gravity felt negotiable. The dead leaves on the ground stirred, not from wind, but from my will. A flicker of thought, and they pressed flat against the stone. Another, and they floated an inch in the air. Perfect. I walked to the front door of the house. It was locked. An electronic keypad glowed beside it. A problem for anyone else. I placed my hand on the heavy oak. A thought, a twist of focused pressure within my new domain. The deadbolt inside the door groaned. Metal screeched against metal. With a sharp crack, the lock shattered. The door swung open. Inside, the house was dark. The power was out across the city. As expected, I closed the door behind me. The silence in here was different from the silence outside. It was a shield. The distant sirens and screams were muffled by thick walls and double-paned glass. I walked through the cavernous foyer, my footsteps echoing on the marble floor. In the massive living room, a wall of glass looked out over the valley. I walked to the window. Far below, in the basin of the city, I could see flickers of orange. Fires. I knew the layout of the city by heart. One of those fires was in the district of my old apartment complex. I watched the column of black smoke climb into the bleeding sky. A smile touched my lips. It wasn't born of joy. It was the feeling of a slate being wiped clean. Time to work. The garage was my first stop. As I'd anticipated from the online listings, a large diesel generator sat in the corner, hooked up to the house's main breaker panel. A 200-gallon tank stood beside it. Full. The previous owner had been prepared for blackouts, but not for this. I checked the oil and the connections. Everything was in order. My hands moved with purpose. From the infinite backpack, I summoned a heavy-duty battery, fully charged. I connected the leads. A flick of a switch. A turn of a key. The generator coughed twice, then roared to life. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, a testament to raw power. I went back inside the house. Lights flickered on one by one. First the foyer chandelier, then the track lighting in the kitchen, then the lamps in the living room. The house blazed with light, a beacon of defiance in the encroaching twilight. The refrigerator hummed, the air conditioning kicked in, pushing a stream of cool air into the stuffy room. I walked to the kitchen island. From the backpack, I brought out a bottle. A Chateau Margaux, vintage 1996. A prize from an old, hidden quest in the beta. I produced a corkscrew and a crystal glass. The pop of the cork was a punctuation mark. I poured. The wine was the color of dark blood. I found a portable Bluetooth speaker in a drawer. It had a charge. I paired it with a small, rugged data slate, also from my inventory, its memory loaded with terabytes of offline media. A few taps and music filled the room. Vivaldi, the sharp, frantic strings of Winter. I took the glass and walked to the second-floor balcony. I leaned against the railing, the cool metal a pleasant weight against my hands. Below, my little fortress glowed. Every light was on. It was a flagrant, arrogant display. A lighthouse in a sea of drowning men. The world outside was a cacophony. The distant, rhythmic pop-pop of small arms fire. A helicopter whirred overhead, its searchlight cutting a desperate path through the darkened suburbs before veering away. A fresh wave of screams rose from a house a few blocks down. It sounded like a family. I took a sip of wine. The complex flavors of dark fruit and old leather rolled over my tongue. Here, on this balcony, the chaos was just a show. A distant inconvenience. The contrast was exhilarating. Out there was the new reality for 99.9% of humanity. Fear, pain, a frantic scramble for a can of beans, a sudden, brutal end in the jaws of a monster. In here, it was Vivaldi in vintage Bordeaux. My domain rippled, a silent alarm in my mind. It was the threat perception aspect. Someone with hostile intent had entered the 10-meter perimeter. I didn't move, I didn't turn around, I listened past the music. My senses, amplified within the sphere, picked it up. Footsteps, on the grass just beyond the back patio. Soft, trying to be quiet, more than one person. I took another slow sip of wine, looking out at the burning city. They had seen the lights. They had seen the promise of safety, of supplies, of order. And they were coming to take it. The music swelled, a frantic, beautiful prelude to the violence that was about to unfold. I let them get closer. Let them think the prize was within their grasp. This was the game now. And I was the one who made the rules. 3 days. The world had been breaking for 3 days. From the second-floor balcony, the one that overlooked the rest of Paradise Cove, I had a perfect view of the decay. The fires in the city basin had burned themselves out, leaving greasy black pillars that smeared the sky. The air, even up here, carried the smell. Rotting meat and burnt plastic. Down in the cul-de-sac, maybe 200 yards away, the others had gathered. The survivors, 20, maybe 30 of them, huddled around the community pool of a smaller mansion. I recognized Greg Peterson among them. Before, he was the loud one at the WA meetings, a mid-level director for some tech-adjacent company, always dressed in a crisp polo shirt and talking down to the groundskeepers. Now his shirt was stained and his face was a mask of gray exhaustion. He was trying to be in charge. I could see it in the way he stood, the way he gestured with his hands while the others sat on the concrete, heads bowed. They were drinking from the pool. Yesterday, the water had been a clear, inviting blue. Now, it was cloudy. A film of dust and ash coated the surface. They had run out of bottled water. Their phones were dead. Their hope was a battery draining with every passing hour. I watched a woman break down, her shoulders shaking, and no one moved to comfort her. They didn't have the energy. My domain rippled, a familiar pressure change. No threat, just a zombie, a level 1 straggler, bumping uselessly against the thick wrought iron fence at the far end of my property. It moaned, a low, wet sound that didn't carry this far. An annoyance. I ignored it. I turned from the balcony and went back inside. The air conditioning was a cool kiss on my skin. The house was an island. My island. In the living room, the wall that faced the kitchen was a blank expanse of white, perfect for my needs. A thought, a mental command to the infinite backpack. A high-definition projector and a portable power station materialized on the marble floor. I set it up on the coffee table. Another command, and a thick black cable snaked from the projector to the data slate I'd left on the counter. I powered it on. The wall lit up. It was a movie. Something loud and stupid with lots of explosions. A film I downloaded years ago and never watched. The sound boomed from the Bluetooth speaker, a ridiculous symphony of gunfire and swelling orchestral scores. Work done, I walked to the kitchen island. Time for dinner. I commanded the backpack. A cast iron pot appeared. A portable induction cooktop. Then, the food. A slab of Japanese A5 Wagyu, its fat marbled like a work of art. A bundle of fresh asparagus. King oyster mushrooms. A head of Napa cabbage. A container of rich, dark beef broth. A small bottle of soy sauce, a dish of minced garlic. All perfectly preserved. I sliced the beef. The knife glided through it. I filled the pot with broth and set it on the cooktop. Soon, the air filled with a new scent, overpowering the distant decay. The rich aroma of simmering beef and garlic, the sharp, clean smell of fresh vegetables. It was an obscene perfume in a world of rot. I sat on the plush leather sofa, the movie blasting explosions across the wall, and started to cook my food, piece by piece, in the bubbling broth. The wind shifted. I knew the moment it happened. The scent, my scent of life and abundance, was carried from my open balcony door down towards the cul-de-sac. Down towards the thirsty, starving people drinking from a dirty pool. I could almost feel their heads lifting, their noses twitching. A pack of starving dogs catching the scent of a steak. It didn't take long. My Monarch's domain buzzed with a proximity alert. Hostile intent. Not one. 4 of them. They were at my front gate. I saw them on the monitor I'd set up, a feed from a small drone I'd parked on the roof. Greg Peterson was in the lead. He held a golf club like a weapon. The 3 men with him were clutching a tire iron, a heavy rock, and a sharpened piece of rebar. Their faces were grim, desperate. They didn't try the gate. They found a section of the stone wall that was lower, and scrambled over it, clumsy and loud. They moved across my lawn, their feet trampling the perfect grass. They stopped before the patio, staring at the light and sound spilling from the living room. They could see my silhouette on the sofa. They could see the movie playing on the wall. They could smell the food. I took a tender slice of beef from the pot, dipped it in the sauce, and ate it. It melted on my tongue. The movie reached a crescendo. A building collapsed in a ball of digital fire. A fist hammered on the glass of my patio door. Bam, bam, bam. Hey, in the house. We know you're in there. It was Greg's voice, strained with a false authority. I didn't move. I ate another piece of beef. Bam, bam, bam. Harder this time. The glass trembled. Open this door, now. This is a community matter. We need to pool resources. I sighed. Theatrix. I placed my chopsticks down, stood up, and muted the movie. The sudden silence was jarring. Only the soft bubbling of the hot pot remained. I walked to the glass door. They flinched back when I came into the light. My face was calm. I was clean. My clothes were clean. I probably looked like an apparition to them. Greg puffed out his chest. Listen, kid, we saw the lights. We know you've got power. You've got food. We're requisitioning it for the good of the group. Open up, give us what you have, and we'll let you be part of our security detail. We'll protect you. His eyes weren't looking at my face. They were locked on the hot pot behind me. His throat worked as he swallowed. The man with the tire iron was drooling. Literally, a thin string of saliva dripped from the corner of his mouth. Protect me? I asked. My voice was quiet. Yeah, there's monsters out there. You're just one person. You need us. He took a step forward, brandishing the golf club. Now open the door before we decide to break it down. I looked at him, really looked at him, the crumbling ego, the desperation dressed up as command. He was just code, badly written code. I smiled, a small, thin smile. Protect me? With what? And then I activated my domain. I didn't push him. I didn't touch him. I simply targeted the space he occupied and changed a single rule. Gravity. I tripled it. It wasn't a push. It was a sudden, crushing weight from all directions. Greg Peterson's swagger vanished, replaced by a grunt of pure shock. His body folded. His knees, unable to support the new, immense load, gave out completely. Crack. The sound was like 2 stones being smashed together. It was the sound of his kneecaps hitting the slate patio. He screamed, a high, thin wail of agony as his full weight, now feeling like over 500 pounds, drove the shards of his own bones into the stone. He collapsed onto his hands and knees, his face inches from the ground, his arms trembling as they tried to hold his torso up. The other three froze, their eyes wide with a new kind of fear. This wasn't a zombie. This wasn't a monster. This was something else. They looked at me, standing serenely behind the glass, and they saw a god. Or a demon. I focused on Greg. Get out. He tried to push himself up. His arms shook violently. He managed to lift his head, his face a mess of tears, sweat, and disbelief. He couldn't speak through the pain. I let the gravity return to normal. The release was as sudden as the onset. He gasped, his body suddenly light. He tried to stand, then shrieked again as his shattered knees refused to hold him, and he tumbled sideways onto the patio, clutching his ruined legs. The other three didn't need to be told twice. They dropped their makeshift weapons. The tire iron clanged loudly on the stone. They grabbed Greg by his arms and started dragging him, his legs trailing uselessly behind him, leaving 2 dark streaks on the lawn. They scrambled back over the wall and vanished into the darkness. I watched them go. Then I turned, walked back to my sofa, unmuted the movie, and picked up my chopsticks. The beef was still warm. The broth was still bubbling. The explosions on the wall were still bright. I spent the next hour finishing my meal. When I was done, I cleared everything away, back into the silent, ordered space of the backpack. The house was clean again. But the work wasn't finished. I summoned my next set of tools. 4 weatherproof, infrared security cameras. A spool of shielded cable. A multi-tool. I went outside. The night air was cool. I started with the front gate. I mounted a camera on one of the stone pillars, high up, giving a clear view of the street outside. I ran the cable along the top of the wall, securing it with clips. I placed another at the back corner, where Greg's group had climbed over. A third covered the west flank. The fourth, the east. They were small, black, and nearly invisible against the dark stone in the night. It took 2 hours. My movements were efficient, practiced. I ran the cables into the garage, through a drilled hole in the wall, and into a small, windowless room on the first floor that was meant to be a wine cellar. I designated it the new control room. I brought out a large 4K monitor and a processing unit. I connected the feeds. The wall lit up, not with a movie, but with 4 crisp, black and white quadrants of reality. I saw the empty street. I saw the trampled lawn. I saw the darkness of the neighbor's yard. I saw everything within a 100-meter radius of my fortress. A silent, all-seeing eye. As I was admiring my work, a new window appeared in my vision. Not one I had summoned. A system-wide message. Translucent blue. Global player ranking system now online. Ranking is based on a composite score of level, kills, and special achievements. Top 10,000 players will be displayed. Good luck, players. A list materialized. Most of the slots, from 10,000 all the way up to the top 100, were blank. A few names flickered in the lower thousands. Names I didn't recognize. The system was automatically registering anyone who had gained a level or a notable achievement. My name, Alex Fong, was not on it. A function of the beta privilege. I could remain anonymous until I chose to reveal myself. Let them fight for scraps of recognition. It was meaningless. I zoomed in with one of the cameras, focusing on the distant huddle by the pool. The sound pickup was sensitive. I could hear them. Greg Peterson was propped against a lounge chair, his legs crudely splinted with sticks and belts. He wasn't screaming anymore. He was talking, his voice a low, hateful rasp. Not human. Some kind of freak. All that food, that power. We have to do something, another voice muttered. We can't, a third voice said, trembling. Did you see what he did? He's one person. Greg spat. We get stronger. We get our own. Whatever that was. The message, it said we get stronger by killing those things. That's the key. We don't need his scraps. We hunt. We level up. And then we come back, and we take everything. I watched on the monitor. I saw the fear in their eyes give way to a new, ugly spark. Greed. Resentment. The desire for revenge. A few minutes later, I saw them move. Not Greg, he was immobile. But 4 of the other men. They picked up the discarded rebar and tire iron. They found a few more crude weapons. They gathered at the front gate of Paradise Cove, the one I had driven through 3 days ago. They hesitated, then slid the heavy iron gate open just enough to slip through, and disappeared into the darkened streets beyond. I leaned back in my chair, a cold smile touching my lips. They were going to hunt. They thought they were the predators now. They were going to grind levels and come back as a threat. It was almost cute. I watched the empty street on my new monitor, waiting. This was the game, and they were playing it exactly as I expected. 2 days passed in methodical preparation. I spent the daylight hours on the roof, installing the solar panels I had retrieved from the hidden maintenance depot of the community. They were heavy, cumbersome things, but my own strength, enhanced by the system to something beyond a normal human's, made the work manageable. I laid the cables, connected them to the power bank in the garage, and watched the digital display as the battery icon filled. Self-sufficiency, the first pillar of any real fortress. In the control room, I watched the other survivors. Their world was shrinking, the dirty pool water was almost gone. Their small pile of scavenged canned goods had dwindled to nothing. They had become gaunt, their movements slow. All except for one. His name was Rick. I remembered him from before. A fitness trainer, always jogging through the neighborhood with a self-satisfied smirk. He had been with Greg's group, the one holding the sharpened rebar. He now carried it with a new confidence. The day before, I had watched on the drone feed as he led a small, desperate party out of Paradise Cove. They stumbled upon a lone goblin, a creature of low cunning and frail constitution. The others hesitated, but Rick, driven by hunger or a death wish, had charge. His wild, clumsy attack had worked. The rebar found its mark. I saw the faint glimmer of light as the system rewarded him. When he returned, he was different. He walked with a swagger, his chest puffed out. To prove his point, he balled his fist and punched the hood of a parked golf cart. The metal dented with a loud thud. The others stared, their exhaustion momentarily forgotten, replaced by awe. He had power, a sliver of it, a pathetic, F-rank strength enhancement, if my memory of the system served me, but to them, he was a god. Greg Peterson, his legs bandaged in crude splints, had become Rick's bitter herald. I heard their conversation on the audio feed. He's a freak, Rick, just one man. Greg's voice was a low hiss of pain and envy. One man with everything, Rick countered. I could see him on the monitor, flexing his bicep. This power, I got it from killing a monster. It's the rule of the game now. We kill, we get stronger. He's been hoarding, getting stronger on his own. It's not right. The logic was twisted, born of desperation and greed, but it was infectious. The seeds of resentment Greg had planted were now being watered by Rick's newfound power. Hunger gnawed at their reason. Their fear of me was being replaced by the greater fear of starvation. The balance was shifting. By the morning of day 5, it tipped. I saw the gathering on monitor 3. There were more of them this time. 12. Rick stood at their head, the dented pipe in his hand. Greg was not with them, left behind by the pool, a crippled king deposed. The dozen men and women with Rick looked different. The listless despair was gone. In its place was a hard, rapacious gleam. They held kitchen knives, broken table legs, and heavy-duty flashlights. They had a purpose. They didn't bother with the wall. They marched directly to my front gate, a grim procession on the manicured asphalt. Rick rattled the iron bars. Alex, get out here, we know you're in there, listening, his voice boomed, amplified by his confidence. I sat in the cool, silent control room, watching the 4 camera feeds. I saw them from the front. I saw them from the side. My finger rested on the mouse. I could have activated the turrets I planned to build, but it was too soon for that. Some lessons had to be delivered personally. We're giving you a choice, you bastard. Rick shouted, his voice echoing in the quiet street. The others shifted their weight, gripping their makeshift weapons tighter. They were a pack now, drawing strength from each other. You have 2 options. 1. You open this gate and hand over 90% of your food and supplies. And, you give us the 2 prettiest women you're hiding in there. We know you have them. We'll take them for the group's morale. A murmur of agreement went through the small crowd. A few of the men grinned. I felt nothing, no anger, no disgust. It was just data, a threat assessment. The conclusion was simple. Terminate. Option 2, Rick yelled, savoring his moment, is we tear this gate down, we come in, and we kill you. We take everything anyway, and we'll find those girls ourselves. He was still shouting when I stepped out onto the second-floor terrace, the one directly above the gate. The morning sun was at my back, casting me in silhouette. I said nothing. I just stood there, looking down at them. The sight of me stopped Rick mid-rant. He squinted up at me. There he is. See? I told you he was listening. Last chance, Alex. Open the gate. I raised my hand. My domain expanded, a silent, invisible dome of force that bloomed outwards. covering the gate and the street in front of it. It was not a whisper. It was a physical change in reality. The effect was instantaneous. Rick froze, his mouth half open. His eyes went wide. The laws of physics had just been rewritten in the space he occupied. A pressure, immense and unyielding, slammed down on him from every direction. It was not a push, but a fundamental increase in his own weight. His body, now effectively weighing over 600 pounds, was a burden his skeleton could not bear. His knees didn't just buckle. They detonated. There was a wet, crunching sound, audible even from the terrace. His legs folded under him as if they were made of paper, and he crashed to the asphalt. But the pressure wasn't just vertical. It was everywhere. His arms were pinned to his sides. His lungs fought for air against the immense clamp. He couldn't even scream, only a choked gurgle escaped his lips. It happened to all of them. The entire group of 12 collapsed as one. A man fell forward, his jaw hitting the ground with a sickening crack. A woman landed on her side, her arm trapped beneath her, and I heard the sharp snap of bone. They were like insects suddenly encased in amber, their bodies contorting under a force they could not comprehend. Panic flared in their eyes, a raw, primal terror that completely extinguished their earlier aggression. They were helpless, pinned to the ground by the very air around them. I looked down at Rick. His face was pressed into the asphalt, his body twitching. His misplaced confidence was a fading memory, replaced by the sheer shock of his powerlessness. This was not a fight. This was an execution. I lowered my hand, and from the empty air, the eternal pistol took form. It glowed with a soft, white light, cool and clean in the morning sun. It made no sound. I aimed. A beam of pure energy, no thicker than a pencil, lashed out. It crossed the 30 yards in an instant. It struck Rick's right leg just above the knee. There was no bang. There was a sizzle and a flash of red mist. The beam didn't just break the bone or tear the flesh. It atomized it. His femur, the skin, the muscle. It all vanished in a cloud of vaporized blood and tissue. The lower half of his leg, still pinned by the gravitational field, remained on the ground, disconnected. The sudden release of pressure from the wound allowed him to finally find his voice. A shriek tore from his throat, a sound of such agony and disbelief that it barely sounded human. The other 11, trapped and forced to watch, began to sob and moan, their bodies trembling uncontrollably. I let my voice carry down, calm and even. I did not shout. "I will give you 10 seconds to get off my property," I said. "When I reach 0, anyone still inside my domain dies. The one who spoke stays." The release was as sudden as the onset. The crushing gravity vanished. For a second, they just lay there, gasping. Then my words registered. 10. Panic erupted. They scrambled, tripping over each other. They didn't bother with their weapons. A man with a broken jaw clawed his way forward on his hands and knees, leaving a trail of blood. The woman with the broken arm screamed as she tried to push herself up. They were a terrified, broken herd. 9. They clawed at the gate, fumbling with the latch. One of them managed to slide it open just enough to squeeze through. They poured out, falling over each other in their haste to escape the invisible line I had drawn. 8. They were all out now, all except Rick. He tried to crawl, dragging his mangled stump of a leg behind him. The raw end left a thick, wet smear of red on the black asphalt. He looked back at me, his face a mask of pleading terror. 7. I raised the pistol again. This time, I aimed for his head. He opened his mouth to beg. The second beam of light erased his scream. I stood on the terrace for another minute, watching the others flee down the street until they were out of sight. The scent of vaporized blood was faint on the breeze. I let the pistol dissolve back into nothing. The threat was neutralized. The mown grass of my lawn was still perfect. I went back inside and headed for the garage. The work was not done. A problem had been solved, but a vulnerability had been exposed. The wall. It was stone, but it was climbable. That had to change. From the infinite space of my backpack, I materialized my next set of tools. Heavy leather work gloves, a bolt cutter, and 20 large, heavy-duty rolls of B40 steel mesh, followed by 10 spools of military-grade barbed wire. The work was methodical. I started at the front gate and worked my way around the perimeter. I unrolled the thick steel mesh, securing it to the inside face of the 3-meter-high stone wall with hardened steel anchors that I drilled directly into the mortar. It was a double layer. Then came the top. I created a curved overhang, facing outwards, an impassable lip of woven steel. Finally, I spooled out the barbed wire, weaving dense layers over the top and along the upper foot of the mesh. Anyone trying to climb would be shredded. It took the rest of the day. The sun beat down, but I did not tire. The physical labor focused my mind. As dusk settled, I returned to the control room. The wall was now a gray, menacing cage of steel and thorns, glinting under the security lights. A true barrier. I opened the system interface. The global chat, a feature that had come online with the ranking system, was a chaotic stream of messages from around the world. NY_Survivor22, anyone in Brooklyn? We have a holdout at the old precinct. Need people with powers. The awakened get extra rations. Tokyo Hunter. Level 3 goblin horde spotted moving towards Shibuya. Avoid at all costs. Londoner 01, has anyone seen the rankings? Who is this, Ares, at number 1? He's already level 7. Paris_healer, forming a guild. The Bastion, healers and tanks needed, safety in numbers. I scrolled through the desperate messages. They were forming groups, discovering the rules, fighting for scraps. They thought leveling up and forming guilds was the path to salvation. They were still playing the game. I leaned back in the chair. My fortress was secure. The local nuisances were gone. The rest of the world was descending into chaos, fighting over the bones I had no interest in. They could have their street-level brawls and their pathetic little guilds. My path was different. I had a map. I knew where the real treasures were buried. The hidden quests, the unique class shrines, the first world boss that dropped a legendary tier crafting schematic. I had let them have a 5-day head start. It was more than enough. On my monitors, I saw that the last of the survivors from Rick's group were packing what little they had, preparing to abandon Paradise Cove entirely. This place was haunted for them now. Good. I wanted the quiet. Watching them leave, a new resolve settled within me. The defensive phase was over. It was time to go on the offensive. It was time to put my name on the leaderboard. Not just on it. At the very top, the garage door whirred upwards, revealing the world I had blocked out for 2 days. The smell hit first. It wasn't just the rot of the uncollected garbage, but something sweeter, heavier. The scent of death left to bake in the sun. I climbed into the reinforced off-road truck I had retrieved. The engine turned over with a low, confident growl, a sound of order in a world of decay. I drove past the main gate. Rick's body was gone, so were the bloodstains on the asphalt. The carrion birds or the roaming monsters had been efficient. The streets of Paradise Cove were empty. The remaining survivors had fled. A child's bicycle lay on its side on a perfect green lawn. A front door hung open, swinging slightly in the breeze. Once I left the gated community, the change was stark. The city was a wreck. Cars were abandoned at all angles, some burned out husks, others just left in the middle of the road. I steered the truck onto the sidewalk, its heavy-duty suspension easily mounting the curb. My target was a commercial district 3 miles away. My memory provided the map. They appeared soon enough, a shambling group of 5 zombies, drawn by the sound of the engine. Their clothes were shredded office attire. A woman in a torn blazer, her jaw hanging slackly. A man with a tie still knotted around his neck, one arm missing. They were slow, clumsy, their danger coming from numbers and disease. To others, a group of 5 was a roadblock, a threat to be avoided. To me, they were experience points. I didn't slow down. I aimed the truck's massive steel bumper at the center of the group. The impact was a series of wet thuds. Bodies were thrown aside like ragdolls. One got caught under the wheels, and I felt a jarring bump and heard the crunch of bone. A notification flashed in the corner of my vision. You have killed a level 1 zombie. Plus 5 XP. You have killed a level 1 zombie. Plus 5 XP. I didn't even read them all. I kept driving, my eyes scanning the streets. I saw other people, a face peering from behind a boarded-up window. A small group huddled in the mouth of an alley, their eyes wide with fear as my truck roared past. They saw a vehicle. They saw a single man driving in the open. They couldn't understand it. They were mice, hiding from the cats. I was the exterminator. The streets grew thick with them. Zombies. Goblins, small and green, armed with crude clubs and rocks. The occasional mutated dog, its skin sloughing off to reveal raw muscle. I stopped the truck in the middle of a wide plaza. I got out, leaving the engine running. The sound drew them in from every direction. Dozens of them, a slow, moaning tide of monsters. I raised my hands. The eternal pistols materialized, one in each hand, their smooth white frames cool against my skin. I started firing. There were no loud reports, no recoil. Just a whisper quiet hiss and a thin beam of white light. The first beam struck a goblin in the chest. A fist-sized hole appeared, cauterized and smoking. It collapsed without a sound. You have killed a level 2 goblin. +10 XP. I didn't aim for the chest again. I aimed for the head. Hiss. A zombie's head vanished in a fine red mist. Hiss. Another one. Hiss. 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 My hands moved in a steady, practiced rhythm. Left hand, right hand. Target acquisition, fire, target acquisition, fire. A mutated dog lunged, its jaws snapping. A beam of light erased its skull midair. Its body skidded to a stop at my feet. The express notifications were a constant, scrolling feed in my vision. Some got close. When a zombie shuffled within arm's reach, the tearing moon dagger appeared in my right hand, the pistol dissolving. The blade was black, catching no light. I swung it. The arc was clean. The zombie's head slid from its shoulders, a spray of dark blood fountaining from its neck. The dagger cut through bone and rotten flesh as if they weren't there. In less than 3 minutes, the plaza was silent again, littered with over 40 corpses. My express bar had jumped by a quarter. This was efficiency. Other players formed teams, carefully planned their attacks, and fought desperately for a dozen kills. I was a one-man meat grinder. I got back in the truck and drove on. According to my foreknowledge, the prize wasn't in the open. It was hidden. I parked in a back alley behind a collapsed department store. The smell of urine and decay was strong here. I walked past overflowing dumpsters, my boots crunching on broken glass. I found him propped against the far wall of a dead-end alley, just as I remembered. He was an old man, his clothes little more than rags, a deep, festering wound in his side. He was still breathing, but his eyes were clouded. He wasn't a zombie, he was just a dying man. An NPC, a hidden one. He looked up as I approached, his hand twitching towards a rusty pipe beside him. "Stay back," he rasped, a cough shaking his frail body. I didn't speak. I opened my backpack, a function only I could see, and took out a bottle of clean water and a sterile bandage. I placed them on the ground, a few feet from him. His eyes, full of suspicion, darted from the items to my face. "What do you want?" he asked. "Your story," I said. My voice was flat. He stared at me for a long time. He saw my clean clothes, my lack of fear. He saw the supplies I offered without a word. He looked at the wound in his side, then back at me. He had nothing left to lose. "My daughter," he began, his voice barely a whisper. "We were trying to get to the shelter, the military one. A pack of those things, the dogs. I tried to lead them away, so she could run. I just want to know if she made it." He fumbled inside his jacket and pulled out a small, worn photograph of a young girl with a bright smile. "Her name is Sarah. If you ever find her, tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I love her." He pushed the photograph towards me. I took it. A new screen appeared in my vision, its blue light stark in the grimy alley. Hidden quest. A father's last wish, completed. Description. Grant a dying man his final piece. Rewards. 10,000 express, skill book, dual-wield mastery. The book appeared in my inventory. The massive influx of experience points pushed my level bar over the edge. And then again, and again, you have reached level 8. You have reached level 9. You have reached level 10. Global ranking system unlocked. Global announcement triggered. A deafening chime, audible only to me, rang through my head. A massive, translucent screen appeared before me, visible to every person on Earth connected to the system. Global leaderboard, level ranking. 1. Ares, level 10. 2. Thor, the Pantheon, level 6. 3. Tyrant, Red Star Syndicate, level 6. 4. Kaiser, Eurocorp, level 5. 5. Sakura, Yamato Guild, level 5. The effect was instantaneous. The global chat, which had been a stream of panicked messages and small-scale recruitment, exploded. NY_Survivor22, what the fuck? Level 10? Is that a bug? Londoner 01, Ares? Who the hell is Ares? He wasn't even on the list 5 minutes ago. Paris_Healer, Mon Dieu. 4 levels ahead of Thor? How is that possible? He's the leader of the Pantheon. He has hundreds of people feeding him kills. Red Star_Ivan, Tyrant wants to know the location of Ares. Information will be rewarded handsomely. Tokyo Hunter, this is impossible. This must be a system glitch. No single person can gain that much experience so fast. I dismissed the chat. Their shock was irrelevant. It was a statement. I am here. I am ahead. Don't even think about catching up. I left the old man with the water and the bandage. His fate was sealed. My purpose here was done. On the drive back, I passed a dilapidated apartment complex. A flicker of movement caught my eye. It was on the third floor. A figure, small and impossibly fast, darted across a fire escape. It was a girl. I could feel the faint signature of an awakened ability, a ripple of shadow and silence. Then I saw what she was running from. A pack of 8 dire wolves. They were larger than the mutated dogs, their fur matted with black blood, their eyes glowing with red malevolence. They weren't just running, they were coordinating, 2 of them scaling the wall with unnatural agility, cutting off her escape route, while the others swarmed the base of the fire escape. The girl was a blur of motion. She carried 2 small knives, weaving between the beasts that reached her, her movements economical and deadly. A knife would flash, and a wolf would yelp, black blood spraying, but she was clearly outmatched. Her clothes were torn, a deep gash was visible on her left arm, and her movements, while fast, were becoming strained. She was exhausted. A wolf lunged, and she dodged, but its claws raked across her back, ripping the fabric and drawing blood. She stumbled, catching herself on the railing. It was Anya Petrova. My memory supplied the name and the potential. The Shadow Dancer, the future queen of assassins. In my past life, she had been a legend, a ghost who could infiltrate any fortress and take any life. Right now, she was just a desperate girl about to be torn apart. I brought the truck to a halt. Back at the fortress, I completed the next phase of my work. The barbed wire and steel mesh were good deterrents, but they were passive. They had to be made active. I unspooled heavy-gauge copper wire from my backpack, weaving it through the barbed strands along the entire perimeter. In the garage, I set up a high-voltage industrial transformer, another prize from the hidden depot, and connected it to my solar-powered battery bank. I ran the main cable through an underground conduit to the wall, terminating it at a heavy-duty circuit breaker switch. I flipped the switch. A low hum filled the air, and a faint blue arc of electricity jumped between 2 of the barbs near the gate. A test. I flipped it off. The fence was now a cage of death, ready to be activated at a moment's notice. I sat back in the control room, watching my own security feeds. The fortress was complete, for now. An island of power and order. On another monitor, I scrolled through the global chat. The new faction, the Pantheon, was making another announcement. Thor, the Pantheon, the old world is dead. A new one is being born from its ashes. We are building a new temple for humanity in what was once the city's central bank. All awakened are welcome. Join us, and together, we will build a new order. Those with power will lead. Those without will serve. This is the new way. Pathetic. They were trying to rebuild the old world structures with a new coat of paint. They were fighting for control of a dying city. They were playing checkers. I was playing chess, and I already knew the endgame. My thoughts returned to the girl on the fire escape. Anya Petrova. She was cornered. 1 wolf was on the railing above her, another below. The rest were waiting. Her breath was coming in ragged gasps. Her fight was almost over. I could drive away. Her fate had nothing to do with me. Saving her offered no immediate quest reward, no express. It was a detour, but I wasn't just collecting experience points. I was building an empire. An empire needed more than just a king. It needed generals, ministers, and executioners. It needed loyal, powerful assets. And a shadow dancer of her potential was an asset of incalculable value. My intervention wouldn't be an act of kindness. It would be an investment. A recruitment. I put the truck in gear. The low growl of the engine cut through the quiet street. Down the block, the cornered girl and the pack of wolves all turned their heads towards the sound. The truck's engine was a low growl in the ruins of the city. Down the street, the tableau was frozen for a half-second. 8 sets of glowing red eyes swiveled from the bleeding girl on the fire escape to my vehicle. The girl, her chest heaving, her knuckles white on her knives, also turned her head. Hope was a stupid thing to have in this new world, but I saw the flicker of it in her eyes. It was a weakness I would have to train out of her. I didn't accelerate or honk. I brought the truck to a smooth stop about 30 yards away, killed the engine, and opened the door. The sound of the latch clicking shut was loud in the silence. I stepped onto the asphalt. The wolves didn't wait for an invitation. The largest of them, a beast the size of a small bear with shoulders bunched with ropes of muscle, let out a low snarl. It was the alpha. It broke from the pack, its paws thudding against the pavement in a dead sprint. The thing moved like a blur, a black missile of teeth and claws aimed for my throat. To anyone else, its speed would have been a death sentence. I took one step forward, then another. I walked towards the charging monster, my stride unhurried. The girl on the fire escape let out a choked cry, a warning or a gasp of horror. The wolf closed the distance. 20 yards. 10. 5. I activated my domain. There was no sound, no flash of light. The air didn't ripple. The wolf, at the peak of its lunge, simply ceased its forward motion. It was as if it had slammed into a sheet of thick glass, but its body didn't bounce off. It just stopped, suspended a few feet off the ground, a foot from my face. Its momentum was gone, erased. Confusion warred with feral rage in its red eyes. It tried to snarl, but its jaw seemed heavy, its muscles refusing the command. Then its legs buckled under a weight that wasn't there. A sharp, wet snap echoed from its front leg. Its body sagged, then slammed onto the asphalt, not with a slide, but a flat, heavy smack. It was pinned, its belly pressed to the ground, its powerful limbs scrabbling uselessly against the pavement. A whimper escaped its throat, high-pitched and full of pain. The hunter had become the prey. The other 7 wolves skidded to a halt, their primal instincts screaming that something was wrong. They growled, circling, unsure of what had just happened to their leader. 2 of them were still on the fire escape, trapping the girl. One of them decided to ignore me and finish the job it had started. It leapt from the railing, a black projectile aimed at the girl's exposed back. It entered my domain mid-air. Its arc flattened instantly. It dropped from the sky like a stone, landing with a sickening crunch on the metal steps 3 feet below the girl. Its spine had broken on impact. It twitched once, then was still. Now there was panic. The remaining wolves knew they were outmatched. They turned to flee, but they were already inside my 10-meter sphere of influence. Their powerful legs pumped, claws scraping frantically on the street, but they moved as if running through hardening concrete. Their movements became slow, labored, their bodies weighed down by an invisible gravity. I raised my hands. The eternal pistols formed from motes of light, their white frames cool in my grip. I turned my attention back to the alpha, still pinned and whimpering at my feet. I leveled the muzzle of the right pistol at its head. A quiet hiss, a thin beam of white light. The wolf's head disappeared in a puff of red mist and charred bone. You have killed a level 7 dire wolf. Plus 75 XP. I walked toward the next one. It was trying to drag itself away, its back legs useless. Hiss. Another head gone. You have killed a level 6 dire wolf. Plus 60 XP. The girl, Anya, watched from the fire escape, her guard forgotten. Her mouth was slightly open. The 2 knives she held so desperately moments ago now hung loosely at her sides. She wasn't watching a fight. She was watching an execution. An extermination. I moved with an economy of motion she, as a budding assassin, could appreciate on a technical level. But the power behind it was something her mind couldn't process. She had fought for her life, her agility and speed her only allies, every dodge and cut a calculated risk that drained her stamina. I just stood there, I walked, I pointed, and the monsters that had nearly killed her died. It was the difference between a fencer and a god pressing the delete button. Hiss, hiss, hiss. One by one, the wolves were put down. The last one on the ground saw me coming and flattened itself to the pavement, whining, its feral rage replaced by a primal terror. It didn't matter. Hiss. You have killed a level 6 dire wolf. Plus 60 XP. The street was quiet again, save for the wind whistling through a broken window nearby. 8 massive corpses, several of them with limbs bent at unnatural angles, littered the asphalt around me. I glanced up at the last wolf, the one with the broken back on the stairs. It was still breathing, its eyes tracking my every move. I raised my pistol. Hiss. The body went limp. You have killed a level 7 dire wolf. Plus 75 XP. I let the pistols dissolve. I looked up at the girl. She was pale, her dark hair stuck to her forehead with sweat. The long gash on her back was weeping blood, staining the back of her gray shirt a dark, wet red. Her breath was still coming in short, sharp gasps, the adrenaline of her fight giving way to shock. I reached into my inventory, a motion only I could perceive, and pulled out 2 items. One was a small vial filled with a glowing green liquid. The other was a vacuum-sealed pack of premium beef jerky. I tossed the vial up to her. My aim was perfect. It arced through the air and landed softly in her lap. She flinched, staring at it as if it were a snake. "Drink it," I said. My voice was flat, a simple command. Her eyes flicked from the vial to my face. She saw no malice, no hidden agenda. Just a man standing among the bodies of her would-be killers. The logic of survival in this new world screamed at her to be suspicious, that nothing was free. But the crimson stain spreading on her shirt and the throbbing pain in her back were more persuasive. Her fingers, trembling slightly, closed around the vial. She uncorked it and, after a moment's hesitation, drank the contents. I watched her face. Her eyes widened as a warm sensation spread from her chest through her entire body. She twisted, trying to look at her back. The pain was gone, not dulling, but gone. She reached back and her fingers came away clean. The gash had closed, the torn fabric of her shirt the only evidence it had ever been there. Instant HP recovery potion, medium grade. Effect: instantly restores 300 hit points. Cures bleeding and minor fractures. A piece of gear that players would kill for in these early days. To me, it was a cheap investment. I tossed the pack of beef jerky up to her. It landed next to the empty vial. The smell of smoked meat, rich and savory, hit her. I saw her swallow. "Eat," I said. This time, she didn't hesitate. She tore the package open with her teeth, her hands still shaking too much for the tear-off notch. She pulled out a piece of dark, dried meat and bit into it. She chewed once, then her eyes closed. She wasn't just eating, she was experiencing flavor for the first time in a week. Salt, spices, the taste of a world that no longer existed. She ate with a desperate, animalistic hunger that spoke of days of near starvation. I waited. I let her finish the entire package. The global chat was probably still buzzing about Ares, but it didn't matter. Time was on my side. When she was done, she crumpled the plastic wrapper in her fist. She looked down at me, her dark eyes clear and sharp, the shock replaced by a guarded intelligence. The fear was still there, but it was buried deep. This was the shadow dancer I remembered. Quick to adapt. "Who are you?" she asked. Her voice was low, but steady. "My name is Ares," I replied, choosing to use the name the world now knew me by. "You have talent. Wasting it by getting eaten by dogs is a poor use of resources." Her brows furrowed. "Resources? You're fast. You know how to use those knives. You have an ability. Shadow-based?" I didn't need her to answer. I could feel the faint residual energy of it. It's undeveloped, raw, but it's there. She stood up slowly, her body now fully recovered. She was wary, like a stray cat being offered food by a human for the first time. She knew there had to be a catch. "What do you want?" she asked, the question every survivor asked. "Your loyalty," I said, my tone leaving no room for negotiation. "You work for me. In return, you get to live. You get food you don't have to risk your life for. You get a safe place to sleep. You get strong." I gestured to the dead wolves. "Stronger than this." She was silent for a long time, weighing her options. Her options were me, or a slow, miserable death in the ruins of the city. It wasn't much of a choice. "Why were you out here?" I asked, changing the subject. "This area is picked clean. There's no food." Her guarded expression crumbled. The reason for her desperate gamble resurfaced. "My brother," she said, her voice tight. "He's hurt. Badly. A piece of shrapnel in his leg from a car pile-up. It's infected." I was looking for medicine. "Anything. Antibiotics. A hospital," I stated. She nodded grimly. "Mercy General, but we couldn't get in. It's occupied." "By what? Monsters?" She shook her head, a flicker of true hatred in her eyes, more than she had shown the wolves. "People. A gang. They call themselves the Vultures. They took it over on the first day. They have all the medicine, all the supplies. They've got guards, guns. They're holding the doctors and nurses hostage. Her voice broke for a moment. They took my brother. They said they'd treat him if I brought them food. But it's a lie. They just want to take whatever you have and worse." I processed the information. A hospital, doctors, nurses, potentially Zhao Linger's pre-awakened counterpart if I was lucky. A treasure trove of medical supplies. A fortified building, and a gang of thugs who thought they were kings of the new world. They were squatting on a valuable resource I needed. My mission to find the Shadow Dancer had just yielded an unexpected side quest. A quest that aligned perfectly with my goals of building a team and securing resources. I looked up at Anya. Her face was a mask of grief and impotent rage. She had the skill, but not the power to challenge a heavily armed gang. She knew it was a suicide mission. "They have your brother," I said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," she whispered. "Show me where it is," I commanded. "We're going to the hospital." The truck's interior was dark. She sat in the passenger seat, rigid, her hands resting on her knees near the hilts of her knives. She didn't look at me. Her gaze was fixed on the shattered cityscape sliding past the window, a blur of gray concrete and black shadows. The rumble of the engine was the only sound. We drove for 10 minutes. To her, it could have been an hour. She was a coiled spring, ready for the trick, the sudden betrayal. It never came. I turned off the main ruined street, onto a side road that was surprisingly clear of debris. Then another turn, into a private lane flanked by high stone walls topped with wrought iron. At the end of the lane was a gate. Not some flimsy chain-link fence, but a solid sheet of reinforced steel, 10 feet high. I pulled a small remote from the sun visor and clicked a button. With a low hydraulic hum, the gate slid sideways. It revealed a driveway, and light. Multiple floodlights mounted on the corners of a large, 2-story stone villa, blazed to life, chasing away every shadow. They illuminated a manicured lawn, neatly trimmed hedges, and a clean, brick-paved path. The air that filtered in through her open window didn't smell of rot and dust. It smelled of cut grass and damp earth. It was the smell of a world that was supposed to be dead. I saw her knuckles turn white. She wasn't looking at a shelter. She was looking at an impossibility. I drove the truck up the driveway and parked it in front of a 3-car garage. I killed the engine. The silence that followed was different from the silence of the city. It wasn't empty. It was full of the absence of danger. I got out. She didn't move. Her eyes were locked on the house. I walked around and opened her door for her. "Out," I said. She flinched at my voice, then unbuckled her seatbelt with a stiff, jerky motion. She slid out of the truck, her boots making a soft sound on the pristine brick. Her head tilted back, taking in the clean windows, the intact roof, the soft yellow light glowing from within. She stood there, a grimy warrior from a forgotten war dropped into a suburban postcard. I walked to the front door, a heavy oak panel with a small, dark screen next to it. I pressed my thumb against the screen. It glowed green, a soft click echoed, and the deadbolt retracted. I pushed the door open and stepped inside, leaving it ajar for her. She followed a few seconds later, moving with the cautious steps of a scout entering hostile territory. She stopped just inside the threshold, her body framed by the doorway. The interior was lit. The air was warm. A long hallway with polished hardwood floors stretched before her. There was no trash, no dust, no stains. It smelled of lemon polish and old wood. She took a hesitant step, then another. Her eyes darted everywhere, scanning the corners, the ceiling, the doorways leading off the hall. She was looking for the threat, the hidden monster, the trap. There was nothing. "You're hungry," I stated. It wasn't a question. "This way." I led her past a living room with leather couches and a dark fireplace, into a large kitchen. Stainless steel appliances gleamed under recessed lighting. A marble island stood in the center. I opened a massive, side-by-side refrigerator. The light from inside spilled out, revealing shelves packed with food. Milk cartons, eggs, blocks of cheese, fresh vegetables in crisper drawers. She made a small sound in the back of her throat, a choked gasp. I pulled out a thick steak, already portioned and wrapped in plastic. I took a pan from a rack hanging over the island, placed it on the gas stove, and turned the knob. A blue flame hissed to life with a soft whoosh. Anya stared at the flame. A functioning gas line. The concept was so alien, so luxurious, it was like watching me perform a magic trick. She had been boiling scavenged water over fires made from broken furniture. I let the steak sizzle in the pan. The smell of cooking meat and butter filled the kitchen. While it cooked, I opened a pantry door. It was a walk-in closet. The shelves were packed from floor to ceiling. Sacks of rice and flour on the bottom. Tins of fruit, vegetables, and fish stacked in neat, shiny columns. Boxes of pasta, crackers, and cereal. Gallon jugs of water. A fortune that people were killing each other for in the city, organized like a grocery aisle. Her composure, the hard shell of the survivor she had built around herself, finally cracked. Her shoulders slumped. Her breathing became audible, a little unsteady. She leaned a hand against the doorframe, as if the sheer sight of so much security, so much abundance, had physically weakened her. I slid the perfectly seared steak onto a plate, added a scoop of leftover mashed potatoes from a container in the fridge, and heated it in a microwave. The machine beeped, another mundane sound from a lost civilization. I placed the plate on the island in front of her. I gave her a fork and a knife. Real, heavy silverware. She stared down at the food. Steam rose from the potatoes. Juice beaded on the surface of the steak. She picked up the fork. Her hand trembled. She cut a piece of meat, put it in her mouth, and chewed. Slowly, her eyes closed. A single tear escaped and traced a clean path through the grime on her cheek. She didn't make a sound. She just ate. Each bite was a sacrament. I let her eat. I leaned against a counter, my arms crossed, and watched her. When she was finished, she had cleaned the plate. She laid the fork and knife down neatly next to it. She looked at me, her dark eyes clear. The guarded intelligence was back, but the foundation beneath it had been shattered and was now rebuilding on a new premise. This place, she started, her voice low. How? I was prepared, I said. It was the only explanation necessary. This is your home now, if you want it. There are rules. The first rule is absolute loyalty. The second is you do what I say, when I say it. No questions. She nodded, her eyes never leaving my face. I understand. Good. Now, the tour. I led her out of the kitchen. Down this hall is the medical bay. I opened a door. Inside were 2 beds, neatly made with clean white sheets. A metal cabinet stood against one wall. I opened it. It was full of antibiotics, painkillers, bandages, suture kits, IV bags. Everything you were looking for. And more. She stared at the rows of medicine bottles. Enough to save 100 brothers. We went down to the basement. I flicked a switch. The lights came on, revealing not a damp, concrete box, but a finished room. On one side, a massive generator sat silent, connected to a bank of deep-cycle batteries. On the other, rows of metal shelves held tools, building materials, and boxes of MREs. Power and backup supplies, I said. The next room was behind a steel door with a keypad lock. I entered the code. The lock chirped. I swung the door open. It was an armory. Racks of rifles, Arkansas 15S, shotguns, hunting rifles. Handguns mounted on a pegboard wall. Crates of ammunition, stacked waist-high. Her knives were tools of desperation. This was a statement of overwhelming force. You'll learn to use all of these, I told her. Finally, I took her back upstairs, to the living room. I picked up a remote. I pointed it at the wall above the fireplace. A white screen descended from the ceiling. I pressed another button. A projector mounted in the back of the room whirred to life, throwing a menu onto the screen. Hundreds of movie posters filled the display. Entertainment, I said, keeps the mind sharp. It was this, more than the food or the guns, that seemed to break her. The sheer, unapologetic luxury of it. The idea that in a world of screaming and dying, someone had the resources and the foresight to care about watching a movie. It was the difference between surviving and ruling. She looked from the screen, to the couches, to me. Her face was pale. She understood. Following me was not a choice for survival. It was a winning lottery ticket. I need a shower, she said. Her voice was flat. Upstairs. Second door on the left. It's yours. There are clean clothes in the closet. She went. I heard the sound of the stairs creaking, a door closing. Then, the hiss of a shower and the rush of water through pipes. I went back to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of whiskey from a bottle on the counter, the ice cubes clinking against the glass. The black markets outside were a mess. A bottle of clean water was worth a man's life, or a woman's body for a week. A can of beans could cause a riot. Here, I had running water, electricity, and aged whiskey. The gap between my reality and theirs was growing wider every hour. An hour later, she came back downstairs. She had washed the dirt and blood from her skin. Her dark hair was damp and hung loose around her shoulders. She wore a plain black sweatshirt and gray sweatpants that were a little too big for her. The clothes of a dead world. But on her, clean and fed, they looked like a uniform. She looked younger, but her eyes were ancient. She found me in the living room, staring into the cold fireplace. She stopped a few feet away. My knives are yours, she said. It wasn't an oath sworn in desperation. It was a statement of fact. A transfer of ownership. My life is yours. Point me at what you want dead. The hospital, I said, turning to face her. Tell me everything. The gang, their leader, their numbers, their weapons. Now that the panic was gone, replaced by a cold purpose, the information was clear and concise. The gang was called the Vultures. Maybe 30 of them. They were led by a man everyone called Rhino. Huge, strong, and short-tempered. He had an ability. He could make his skin as hard as rock. He'd taken a shotgun blast to the chest and it had just angered him. They had a handful of pistols and a couple of rifles taken from dead cops. Pterodactyra ebam narsadera critidasa hasabi biabahara karata. Tadera Niedera Bioctagata Biabarera Janya Sakitsa Sarabaraha Majuda Care. Her brother was one of the patients they were using as leverage. They're thugs, she said, a flicker of the old hatred in her voice. Stupid ones. But Rhino, he's different. He's strong. Is there anyone else important there? I asked, my voice casual. Anyone with skills? She thought for a moment. There's a nurse, a young woman, Lin Zhao. The vultures are scared of her, but they keep her close. I saw her once, when they were moving supplies. A guard cut his arm badly on a broken window. It was a deep gash. She just touched it, placed her hand over the wound. There was a faint green light. When she pulled her hand away, the cut was gone. Rhino keeps her with him all the time. He calls her his good luck charm. I felt a small, cold smile touch my lips. It was exactly as the beta test information had predicted. The vultures were squatting on a goldmine. Not just the medical supplies. They were holding my future team's healer. Hidden quest triggered. The Angel of Mercy. Objective: rescue the nascent life mage Lin Zhao from the vultures at Mercy General Hospital. Rewards: high-grade medical supplies, high favorability with Lin Zhao. Anya was watching me, waiting for a command. She saw the shift in my expression. We go to the hospital tomorrow, I said. The whole gang? Rhino? She asked. There was no doubt in her voice, only a request for clarification. It's time to take out the trash. I finished my whiskey. Get some sleep. You'll need it. She nodded once, a sharp, soldierly gesture, and turned to go back to her new room. To her new life. I stood in the silent house. Asset 1, the shadow. Secured. Tomorrow, I would collect Asset 2, the healer. The vultures and their rock-skinned leader were an irrelevance. They were an obstacle on the map, a temporary resource node waiting to be harvested. They just didn't know it yet. The morning sun did little to warm the dead world. It only made the decay sharper, the shadows darker. We sat in the climate-controlled interior of the armored SUV, the recycled air cool and clean against my skin. Anya was in the passenger seat, the same way she had been the night before, but the rigidity was gone. It had been replaced by a focused calm. She was cleaning her long knives with an oiled cloth, her movements efficient and practiced. The blades were extensions of her hands. I drove slowly. The main roads were graveyards of metal and bone. I navigated the SUV through a maze of stalled cars and scattered debris. The vehicle's reinforced chassis and heavy-duty tires made it simple. A push against the accelerator sent a rusted sedan scraping against a concrete barrier, clearing our path. The sound was a dull thud, barely audible over the engine's low hum. The closer we got to Mercy General Hospital, the thicker the smell became. It wasn't the distant rot of the city. This was fresh, blood and waste and fear. It clung to the air, a physical presence that even the SUV's filtration system couldn't completely erase. More of them were here. The shambling dead, drawn by the scent of the living. They lurched through the streets, their heads turning toward the sound of our engine. But they were too slow, too clumsy. They were background noise. The real danger was always the living. Mercy General loomed ahead, a 10-story block of dirty white brick. The words on its facade were streaked with grime. The main entrance was barricaded. Piled up gurneys, office furniture, sandbags. Men with rifles patrolled the top of the barricade. Vultures. And at the base of the barricade, a different kind of carrion. A crowd of maybe 50 people, gaunt and desperate. Some had crude bandages, stained dark. They weren't yelling. They were begging. A low, miserable chorus of pleas for medicine, for shelter, for a doctor. A man on the barricade laughed and spat down at them. A warning shot cracked from his rifle, kicking up dust a few feet from a woman holding a small child. The crowd flinched back as one. This was the farm. The vultures were the farmers, the people outside were the starving animals, and the hospital was the silo full of grain. Anya finished with her knives. She sheathed them, the leather whispering. 30 of them, she said, her voice even. Rhino is probably on one of the upper floors. He likes the view. And the healer? With him. Always. I saw them then. A small group standing apart from the desperate crowd. 5 of them. 4 men and a woman. Their clothes were cleaner than the rest. their faces less hollow. They looked like college students who had missed the last bus home. One of them, a young man with an earnest haircut and a jacket that was trying too hard to look official, stepped forward. He raised a hand as my SUV approached. I slowed, but I did not stop. He moved directly into my path, forcing me to brake. The SUV hissed to a halt 10 feet from him. He stood his ground, chin up, trying to project an authority he did not possess. His friends fanned out behind him, as if for support. Idiots, Anya murmured, not taking her eyes off them. The young man, Leo, cleared his throat. Hello in there, he called out, his voice straining to be heard over the engine. We need to talk. We're the community action team. This hospital and the supplies inside belong to the people, not to those thugs. I rested my hands on the steering wheel. I watched him through the tinted, bulletproof glass. You have a vehicle like this, you have power, he continued, getting more animated. He gestured at the vultures on the wall, then at the miserable crowd. You have a responsibility to help. We can take this place back if we work together. For the greater good, for a new society. He paused, clearly expecting a response. The engine hummed, the air conditioner blew. I turned my head slightly to Anya. Another fool who thinks morality is a currency. I didn't honk. I didn't speak to him. I simply turned the wheel hard to the right, my foot pressing down on the accelerator. The SUV lurched forward, its heavy tires crunching over a pile of broken asphalt. It passed within 3 feet of Leo, the displaced air from its passage whipping his jacket. He and his friends jumped back, their faces a mixture of shock and outrage. Leo yelled something, but the sound was lost, irrelevant. We drove past them, leaving them in a small cloud of our dust. Through the rearview camera on the dash display, I watched him clench his fists. A righteous anger was building in his eyes. He would wait, he would see what I did, and then he would try to claim a piece of it, using his words as weapons. I turned into a narrow alley 2 blocks from the hospital, the walls so close they scraped against the side mirrors. I killed the engine. The sudden absence of the hum was startling. The sounds of the outside world rushed in. A distant scream, the wet, shuffling sound of a ghoul dragging its leg, the low moan of the wind through broken windows. I tapped the screen on the dashboard. A satellite map of the area appeared, a cached file from my private server. I zoomed in on a specific point 100 yards north of the hospital's main structure. A small, square icon pulsed on the screen. Maintenance access, I said. A sewer junction leading directly into the hospital's sub-basement. They used it to run the original power conduits. The vultures are thugs. They barricade the doors and watch the walls. They don't think about what's under their feet. Anya leaned in, her eyes tracing the lines on the map. She absorbed the information without comment. This was a truth she had learned in the last 12 hours. I didn't guess. I knew. I reached into the console between our seats and pulled out 2 small, in-ear communication devices. I handed one to her. Put this in. It's voice activated. 1 tap to activate, 2 to mute. Keep it on. She fitted the device into her ear, her fingers deft. It was almost invisible against her skin. On the radio, a fragment of a broadcast cut through the static. A calm, deep voice. Offer safety and order. At the sanctuary, we rebuild. We pray. We survive as one. Find your way to us. God provides for his flock. The signal dissolved back into static. The sanctuary, another group of players making their move. They were collecting the sheep. I was collecting wolves. I opened the rear door of the SUV and pulled out a black duffel bag. Inside were 2 suppressed pistols and a set of compact night vision goggles. I handed a pistol and a set of goggles to Anya. She took them, her movements economical. She checked the weapon's action, did a quick magazine count, and holstered it. She didn't need to be told how to use it. The sub-basement will be dark, I said. Possible ghoul nests. Low-level threats only. We move fast and quiet. Get to the stairwell, then up to the 3rd floor. Pharmacy and central supply. That's where Rhino keeps his hoard. And the healer. My plan was simple. I didn't need to fight 30 men. I just needed to cut the head off the snake. And take what was his. Rhino, Anya said. The name was flat, a piece of data. Skin like stone. Bullets might not work. Everything has a weakness. I pulled my own weapon, one of the eternal pistols, from my starter pack. It felt cool and solid in my hand. No magazine, no slide. Just a sleek frame that glowed with a faint internal light. I also checked the tattered moon dagger at my belt. Its edge was sharp enough to split atoms. Hard skin was just a material. All materials could be broken. We exited the SUV into the stench of the alley. The walls were slick with grime. A gutter overflowed with dark, stagnant water. I looked at Anya. She had the goggles perched on her forehead, ready. The pistol was secure in a thigh holster. Her knives were accessible on her vest. She was a weapon, polished and aimed. She watched my face, waiting for the signal. I walked to the end of the alley. A circular, cast-iron manhole cover was set into the broken concrete. It was heavy, sealed with years of rust and neglect. I knelt, found a purchase in one of the small openings, and pulled. My raw strength, augmented by the system's passive stat boosts, was far beyond a normal human's. The heavy plate scraped against the concrete, the sound loud and grating in the alley. A wave of foul air, cold and damp, washed over us from the dark opening. The smell of a forgotten, subterranean world. It was the smell of our entry point. Anya didn't flinch. She simply peered down into the blackness, her hand resting on the grip of her pistol. I looked back in the direction of the hospital. I could still hear the faint, pathetic cries of the crowd, the arrogant shouts of the vultures. I could picture Leo and his team, watching, planning their moral crusade. They were all playing a game they didn't understand, moving pieces on a board while a tidal wave was about to wash them all away. I was not playing their game. I looked at Anya. I nodded toward the dark hole. "Let's go," I said. "Time to take out the trash." I swung my legs over the edge and descended into the darkness, my boots finding the first rung of the iron ladder. Anya followed a second later, the manhole cover scraping shut above us, plunging our world into a complete and utter black. The blackness was total. The metal cover slammed shut above us, and the world vanished. The air changed instantly. It was thick, cold, and smelled of decay and damp earth. Water dripped somewhere nearby, each drop a loud echo in the confined space. My hand was on the cold, rusted rung of the ladder. I felt its texture under my glove, pitted iron, slick with something I didn't want to identify. Anya was a presence behind me, her breathing controlled, a faint rustle of fabric as she found her own footing. There was no hesitation from her. I lowered myself rung by rung. 10 feet down, my boots hit concrete. I took a step away from the ladder and flicked the switch on the side of my head. The world ignited in shades of sickly green. The night vision goggles turned the sewer tunnel into a long, cylindrical tomb. Pipes of varying sizes ran along the curved walls, weeping dark liquid. The floor was covered in a shallow layer of murky water that swirled around my ankles as I moved. Anya landed a moment later, as quiet as a cat. Her own goggles were on, her face an emotionless green mask. She scanned the tunnel in the opposite direction. Clear. The map on my dashboard display was now a memory. North. 100 yards. We started moving. Our boots made soft splashing sounds in the water. That was the only noise besides the drip. I kept my pistol down but ready. Anya had hers in hand, the suppressor a long, dark snout. This was a place for knives. Less noise. We didn't have to wait long. A shape detached itself from the shadows ahead, where a smaller pipe junction created an alcove. It was vaguely human, but its joints bent the wrong way. It shambled toward us, its head lolling on its neck, a low, wet gurgle coming from its chest. A ghoul, a low-level janitor of the new world. Anya raised her pistol, but I held up a hand. A single, sharp gesture. She understood. Her arm lowered. I drew the tattered moon dagger from its sheath at my belt. The blade didn't reflect the green light, it seemed to drink it. I did not slow my pace. The ghoul lurched, its arms reaching. I sidestepped its clumsy grab. My left hand shot out, grabbing the back of its head. I slammed its face into a thick, rust-caked pipe running along the wall. There was a wet crunch, like stepping on a rotten piece of fruit. The ghoul went limp. I let it slide down into the filthy water. No wasted motion. I didn't even check to see if it was finished. I knew it was. We continued. We passed 2 more. They were feeding on a swollen sewer rat. They didn't even notice us until my dagger was in the back of one's skull and Anya's boot had crushed the throat of the other against the concrete floor. Her movements were brutally efficient. She wiped her boot on a dry patch of wall and fell back into step beside me. We found the iron ladder a minute later. It was exactly where the cached map said it would be, leading up to a grated ceiling. This was the maintenance access to the sub-basement. I listened, a low hum of machinery from above, the distant, rhythmic thumping of a generator. Up, I said. It was the first word either of us had spoken. I climbed. The ladder was newer, less slick. At the top, I put my shoulder to the grate and pushed. It gave way with a metallic groan, loud in the confined space. I froze, listening. The humming just continued. No shouts, no footsteps. I pushed the grate aside and hauled myself out. We were in a boiler room. Massive, steel behemoths sat silent and cold, but thick bundles of new cables snaked across the floor, all leading to a roaring portable generator in the far corner. The air was dry and smelled of dust and ozone. I could feel a faint vibration through the soles of my boots. A low, powerful humming from outside the building itself. A wind was picking up. The first stirrings of the storm. We ditched the goggles. The room was lit by bare, hanging bulbs powered by the generator. We moved to the door, a heavy steel fire door propped open with a brick. The corridor beyond was dim, lit only by emergency lights spaced far apart. The walls were peeling. A gurney lay on its side. It smelled of antiseptic and something else. Fear. Third floor. Pharmacy and central supply. This was Rhino's den. The stairwell was at the end of the hall. We moved along the wall, our steps making no sound on the tiled floor. We were ghosts in a dead place. As we neared the stairwell door, I heard it. Voices. Laughter. From above. 2 men. I held up a hand, and Anya melted into the deep shadow of a doorway. I activated the Dominion field. It was not a sound, not a light. It was a pressure in my mind, an extension of my will. The air in a 10-meter sphere around me became my instrument. I didn't look at the guards on the floor above. I focused on a small utility room 50 feet down the corridor behind us. Inside, I could sense the objects. A metal bucket, a mop, shelves of cleaning supplies. I focused on the bucket. I increased its specific gravity by a factor of 10. The metal shelf holding it groaned and then snapped. The bucket, now weighing over 100 pounds, crashed to the floor with a tremendous, echoing clang. The laughter from the stairwell cut off. The fuck was that? A voice yelled. Go check it out, another voice ordered. Footsteps clattered down the stairs, then receded down the hall in the direction of the noise. I gave it 10 seconds. I nodded to Anya. We slipped through the stairwell door and started up. The air grew warmer with each floor. We passed the second floor landing. The sounds were louder now. Music, a tinny rock song from a cheap portable speaker. More laughter, the smell of stale beer and sweat. We reached the third floor landing. The door was slightly ajar. I could see down a wide hallway. It was brighter here. They had more lights running. A large set of double doors at the end of the hall, the kind that led to a surgical wing or a large ward, was closed. That's where the noise was coming from. I gestured to Anya. Scout. She gave a single, slight nod. She moved to the wall opposite the door and flattened herself against it. Then she was gone. Not gone, but faded. The outlines of her body blurred, shimmered like heat haze, and then vanished. Her shadow veil ability was active. I watched the space where she had been for a moment, then looked back at the door. A minute passed. The in-ear comm I'd given her crackled once. A single, soft click. Clear path. I moved. I stayed low, using overturned beds and medical carts for cover. The journey down the 100-foot corridor felt like a mile. The music from the room grew louder. A man was shouting over it, his words slurred. I reached the double doors. I put my eye to the small, wire-meshed window in one of them. The blueprint in my mind was now a live feed. It was a large recovery room, stripped of most of its beds. In the center, a group of men sat around a makeshift table made from a door set on 2 gurneys. They were playing cards, drinking whiskey from medical beakers. A mountain of a man sat in a large armchair, his back to me. Rhino. He wore a dirty leather vest over a massive torso. His bald head gleamed in the light. He was not looking at the card game. He was looking at a young woman kneeling on the floor in front of him. Chloe. She had her hands pressed against the bloody leg of another of Rhino's thugs. A faint, pale green light pulsed from her palms, weak and flickering. The wound on the man's leg was closing, but slowly. The girl was pale, sweat plastering her dark hair to her forehead. She was exhausted. Her eyes, though, were not broken. They held a steady, defiant light. Faster, Rhino grunted. His voice was a low rumble. Chloe didn't answer. She just closed her eyes, concentrating. The green light wavered. Rhino's patience snapped. I said faster, you little bitch. He raised a hand, thick as a dinner plate, to backhand her. That was the signal. I stood up from my crouch. I placed my hand on the door. I activated my Dominion field, expanding it just enough to envelop the entire room beyond the doors. The world inside that room went silent. From my perspective, it was like hitting a mute button. The music cut off. The laughter died. Inside the sphere of my influence, I was the master of physics. I willed the air to be still, to carry no sound. I willed their bodies to be heavy. Through the window, I saw it happen. Rhino's hand, halfway to Chloe's face, stopped dead in the air. His arm trembled, the muscles bulging with strain. His face, which had been a mask of casual cruelty, was now a canvas of stunned confusion. The man playing cards froze with a card held aloft. The man drinking from a beaker couldn't lower his arm. They were all statues, prisoners in their own bodies, their eyes wide with a terror they couldn't comprehend. They were trying to shout, their faces contorting, throats working, but not a whisper could escape. Anya chose that moment to reappear. She hadn't been gone. She had slipped inside when I created the diversion. She shimmered into existence directly behind Rhino's chair, a phantom born from the stale air. Her face was a blank slate. In her hand, one of her long knives was a sliver of polished steel. She didn't rush. She moved with a deliberate grace, placing the point of the blade against the thick, corded muscle of Rhino's neck. I pushed the door open. It swung inward without a sound. I stepped into the room. The 5 conscious men in the room were locked in place, their eyes tracking my movement. The raw panic in them was a satisfying sight. One moment they were kings of their little third-floor fiefdom, drunk on power and stolen liquor. The next, they were insects pinned to a board. Chloe looked up from the floor. Her green healing light flickered out as her concentration broke. She saw the frozen tableau, the silent woman with a knife at Rhino's throat, and then she saw me. She saw the cold pistol in my hand, the utter lack of emotion on my face. Her exhaustion and fear were washed away by a wave of pure, unadulterated shock. I was not one of them. I was not one of the desperate people begging at the barricade. I was something else, a judgment. Rhino's eyes bulged. He tried to activate whatever power he possessed, the stone skin Anya had mentioned. I could feel the resistance, a pointless struggle against my will. In my dominion, my rules were the only ones that mattered. He couldn't move, he couldn't speak, he couldn't even grit his teeth without my permission. I walked past the card players, their horrified eyes following me. I stopped in front of him, looking down. I ignored Anya holding the knife. I ignored the girl on the floor. I looked directly into the eyes of the man who thought he was a predator. My voice was the only sound in the room, clear and calm. "Tell me where the main pharmacy is," I said. "I'll make it quick." Rhino's eyes bulged. Veins stood out on his neck and forehead. A thick cord of muscle in his jaw twitched as he fought my control. He was trying to activate his ability, a futile exertion of will against a law of physics I now owned. The air in the room was mine. The gravity that held him to his chair was mine. His own body was a prison, and I held the only key. I could feel the faint tremor of his struggle, a buzzing vibration against the fabric of my reality. It was like a fly beating its wings against a glass jar. Pointless. Anya's grip on the knife didn't waver. The point stayed pressed against his skin, a single, perfect dimple on his thick neck. She was a statue of lethal intent, waiting for my word. I let his struggle continue for a few seconds. Let him feel the helplessness. Let him understand his place in this new order. Chloe stared, her face a mask of shock, the green healing light gone from her hands. Her gaze shifted from the frozen tableau of thugs to Anya, then to me. Her mind was trying to process an event outside the bounds of her new, brutal reality. I took a step closer to Rhino, my boots making no sound. My voice was the only thing moving in the room. "Third floor. I know it's here. I'm not asking again." His eyes screamed defiance. A low, strangled sound tried to form in his throat, but the air wouldn't carry it. He was trying to say no. I appreciated the spirit, if not the intelligence. I shifted my gaze to the man on his right, the one whose arm was still frozen in the act of raising a medical beaker of whiskey. I focused my will. I didn't want to kill him. Not yet. I just wanted to demonstrate a concept. I isolated his right arm, from shoulder to fingertips. I didn't touch it. I just changed its properties. I increased its specific gravity. A little at first, then more. The man's eyes widened in alarm. His arm, which a moment ago felt normal, now felt like lead. The muscles in his shoulder screamed in protest as they tried to hold up a limb that suddenly weighed 50 pounds. Then 100. There was a wet, tearing sound, followed by a loud, distinct pop. His shoulder dislocated with sickening ease. The arm, no longer supported by the joint, fell limp at his side, hanging at a crooked, unnatural angle. His face contorted in a silent scream, tears streaming from his eyes. The beaker shattered on the floor. No sound. I looked back at Rhino. His defiance was gone, replaced by a raw, primal fear. He understood. This wasn't a power he could fight. It was a force he couldn't even comprehend. I didn't need to speak again. I just watched him. His eyes flickered to a solid steel door at the far end of the room, behind a pile of discarded bloody rags and medical waste. A key hung on a nail hammered into the wall beside it. "Thank you," I said. My Dominion field did not falter. I nodded once to Anya. She didn't hesitate. Her hand moved in a short, precise arc. The knife sliced across Rhino's throat. It was not a dramatic slash. It was a clean, deep cut, severing muscle, artery, and windpipe in a single, efficient motion. A dark line appeared on his neck, which then opened into a gaping red mouth. His eyes went wide with the final shock of death. Blood, thick and hot, pumped out, but it fell straight down, landing on the floor with a muted, wet patter. No gurgle, no death rattle. The silence I commanded was perfect. I raised my own pistol, the Eternal. It was a tool, nothing more. The first thug, the one with the dislocated shoulder, was my target. A single, soft thud. A small, neat hole appeared in the center of his forehead. His head snapped back against the chair. The second, third, and fourth thugs followed in quick succession. Thud, thud, thud. 4 precise shots. 4 bodies slumping in their chairs, a red mist hanging in the air around their heads for a moment before settling. The whole process took less than 3 seconds. I let the Dominion field collapse. Sound crashed back into the room. The tinny rock music from the cheap speaker. The hum of the lights. The drip of a leaky pipe somewhere. And the sudden, sharp gasps of the half-dozen people who had been cowering in the adjoining rooms. They had been drawn out by my final, cold statement to Rhino. The double doors burst open. A man in his late 30s, with a thin face and intense, self-righteous eyes, stood in the doorway. Behind him were 5 or 6 others, a mix of men and women, all looking gaunt and afraid. The man, a man I would come to know as Leo, stared at the scene. He saw the 5 dead bodies, the blood pooling on the floor. He saw Anya wiping her knife clean on Rhino's vest. He saw me, pistol still raised. His face twisted, not in gratitude, but in outrage. "You, what did you do?" he shouted, his voice cracking. He pointed a trembling finger at me. "Who gave you the right to kill them? They were human beings. They should have been captured, put on trial. You're a monster." He took a step into the room, his courage fueled by a sense of moral superiority. He turned to the other survivors peering from the doorway, and to Chloe, who was still on her knees. "You all see this? This man is more dangerous than Rhino. We have to stand together. We demand that he turn over all the medicine and supplies to be distributed fairly." For everyone, a few people behind him nodded, their fear momentarily replaced by a flicker of opportunistic greed. They saw the steel pharmacy door. They saw me as an obstacle to what was behind it. I let a small, cold smile touch my lips. The stupidity was almost breathtaking. I ignored him. I walked past the bodies, my boots squelching in the fresh blood. I took the key from the nail on the wall. It was a heavy, old-fashioned skeleton key. I inserted it into the lock of the pharmacy door. It turned with a heavy, satisfying clunk. I swung the door open. The sight behind it would have made any survivor in this new world weep. Floor-to-ceiling steel shelves, packed 20 feet deep. Antibiotics of every kind, morphine, oxycodone, fentanyl patches. Surgical kits, sutures, antiseptics. IV bags and lines. Vitamins, gauze, bandages, splints. Enough medical supplies to sustain a small town for a year. A treasure beyond measure. Leo and his followers gasped. Their eyes were wide, filled with a desperate hunger. This was their salvation. This was their leverage. "This belongs to all of us," Leo declared, taking another step forward. "We will form a committee to—" He stopped talking. I had turned back to face them. I stood in the doorway of the pharmacy and simply raised my right hand. I didn't say a word. I just activated the retrieval function of the infinite backpack. It was not a vortex. It was not a flash of light. It was simply erasure. The first shelf, laden with thousands of dollars worth of painkillers, vanished. One moment it was there, the next, only empty space. Then the next shelf of antibiotics disappeared. Then the next. Shelf after shelf, box after box, bottle after bottle. Everything dematerialized in a wave of silent, systematic removal. The faces of Leo and his group went from righteous anger to confusion, then to slack-jawed disbelief. Their prize, their new source of power over others, was being deleted from existence right before their eyes. In 10 seconds, the entire pharmacy was bare. The steel shelves stood empty, gleaming under the harsh lights. It was as if a swarm of invisible locusts had picked the room clean. I looked at the now empty room. Then, I turned my attention to a single, forgotten cardboard box on the floor near the entrance, one I had deliberately left untouched. It was filled with common cold medicine, aspirin, and rolls of non-sterile gauze and medical tape. Basic first aid cabinet stuff. I walked over to the box, nudged it with the toe of my boot, and kicked it. It slid across the floor and came to a stop a few feet from Leo's shoes. "Your compassion is worth about that much," I said, my voice flat. "Get out of my sight before I change my mind." The contrast was stark. Leo, the man of words and high-minded ideals, stood trembling, his rhetoric crumbling into ash. Me, the killer, the monster in his eyes, had just committed an act of pragmatic salvation for my own future, and in doing so, had revealed the true, worthless nature of his. The other survivors behind him were silent, their eyes darting between my face, the empty pharmacy, and the pathetic box of supplies at Leo's feet. The greed was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp fear. They understood now. I was not a resource to be managed. I was a force to be avoided. Chloe finally pushed herself to her feet. The other doctors and nurses who had been held captive looked at Leo with expressions of pure contempt. They had been the ones beaten, starved, and forced to work by Rhino's gang. They knew what true survival cost. They looked at me, not with fear, but with a complex mix of awe and calculating appraisal. "We're leaving," I said to Anya. She nodded, her face unreadable, and fell into step behind me. As we walked towards the double doors, Chloe took a hesitant step forward. "Wait." I stopped but didn't turn around. "Take me with you," she said, her voice stronger now. "And Dr. Evans and Maria. We're doctors. We're nurses. We can be useful. We don't belong with them." She gestured vaguely towards Leo's group. I glanced over my shoulder. 3 of them, Chloe and 2 older women, had detached themselves from the larger group. Their faces were pale but determined. They understood the new currency of this world. Useful skills, not empty words. They had made their choice. "Keep up," I said. It was all the acceptance they needed. As we descended the filthy stairwell, leaving Leo and his stunned followers to their box of aspirin, a faint, deep boom echoed from somewhere far across the city. It was not a gunshot. It was a massive, concussive explosion that vibrated through the concrete under my feet. I glanced out a grimy window, seeing a plume of black smoke rising from the downtown district, miles away. Another powerful awakened, I guessed. Or someone who made a mistake. The world was full of them. It didn't matter. I had what I came for. A doctor, 2 nurses, and a pharmacy's worth of supplies now neatly categorized in a space that didn't exist. My fortress needed a med bay. Now, it would have the best one on the continent. The plan was proceeding on schedule. The next step was returning home. And building. The drive back was soundless, save for the hum of the engine and the soft, rhythmic breathing of the 2 women in the back. Dr. Evans and the other nurse, Maria, were asleep, their bodies finally giving in to exhaustion. Chloe sat awake in the passenger seat, staring out at the blighted suburban streets. Her face was illuminated by the passing, broken streetlights. I saw her reflection in the windshield. Her expression wasn't one of fear or relief. It was a look of intense concentration, the look of a person re-evaluating every rule she thought she knew. We passed through the gates of the villa complex. The heavy steel slid shut behind us with a solid thud. Home. The word felt strange. It wasn't a home. It was a fortress. A staging ground. I parked the reinforced SUV in the cavernous underground garage. The lights flickered on automatically, revealing the clean concrete floor and the other vehicles I had collected. A heavy-duty truck. A fast motorcycle. Anya was already out of the back, her movements fluid and silent as she did a quick sweep of the garage. It was a habit, a necessary one. Chloe helped the 2 older women out. They blinked in the bright, clean light, their bodies swaying. They looked at the garage, at the stocked shelves of tools and spare parts along one wall, and their faces held a dawning wonder. This was a different world from the filth-caked clinic. Upstairs, I said. My voice echoed slightly in the large space. Anya will show you the rooms. Clean sheets, running water, hot. The word hot hung in the air. Maria, the older nurse, started to cry. Not loud sobs, just silent tears that traced paths through the grime on her cheeks. I watched Anya lead them towards the elevator, her hand resting lightly on the hilt of a knife at her belt. She was a shepherd guarding a new, fragile flock. Chloe stayed behind. She looked at me, her gaze direct. The medicine. Follow me. I led her to a large, climate-controlled room that used to be a wine cellar. It was empty. I stood in the center, raised my hand, and thought about the pharmacy. The retrieval process was silent. One moment, there was empty space. The next, stacks upon stacks of cardboard boxes and plastic-wrapped pallets appeared on the floor, perfectly arranged. They filled the room, creating narrow aisles between them. The scent of antiseptic and sterile plastic displaced the musty air. Chloe let out a breath she had been holding. She walked forward and ran her hand over a box labeled, morphine sulfate injection. Her fingers trembled. This was a cancer treatment center's pharmacy, she said, her voice low. This is a national asset. It's ours, I corrected her. I walked to a smaller, adjacent room, also empty. This will be the infirmary. That is the supply depot. Organize it. Make it functional. Tell me what you need that isn't in those boxes. I will get it. She looked from the mountain of supplies to the empty infirmary, then back to me. A flicker of something I couldn't name crossed her face. Understanding. She was a professional, and I had just given her the best-equipped workspace on the continent. She didn't need moral speeches or promises of a better world. She needed purpose and tools. I had provided both. All need stainless steel tables, autoclaves, heart rate monitors, a proper surgical lamp. She started, the words coming faster as her mind began to work, to plan. Make a list, I said, cutting her off. I turned and left her there, a queen surveying her new kingdom of medicine. The next few days settled into a new rhythm. Anya handled the perimeter. Her patrols were meticulous, her senses honed. I would watch her on the monitors, a gray shape flitting between the shadows of the manicured lawns, checking the electric fences, the pressure plates, the tripwires. She was the ghost that guarded our walls. Chloe, Dr. Evans, and Maria worked with a feverish intensity. They transformed the empty room into a functional, 3-bed infirmary. I provided the equipment they listed, pulling it from the backpack's depths. Remnants of a hospital supply warehouse I had visited during the beta. The sounds of their work, the clatter of steel, the beeping of calibrated machines, became part of the base's background noise. On the third day, I decided it was time for the next phase. Self-sufficiency. I found Chloe on the rooftop. The sun was bright, casting a harsh glare over the city stretching out below us. Plumes of smoke still rose from a dozen different locations. The constant, distant sound of gunshots was a part of the city's ambiance now. We need a garden, I stated. She shielded her eyes, looking at me. The soil is probably contaminated. And the acid rain you mentioned. I didn't answer. I just walked to the center of the large, flat roof space. I raised my hand. A 16-foot-long steel I-beam appeared out of thin air, held in my grip. I set it down on the concrete with a heavy clang. Then another, and another. I pulled out stacks of thick, tempered glass panes, crates of bolts, spools of wiring, and bags of what looked like dark, rich soil. Within a minute, a small mountain of high-end construction materials sat on the rooftop. Chloe stared, her mouth slightly open. She had seen me pull supplies from the backpack before, but the sheer scale of this was different. This was not retrieval. This was creation. You're building a greenhouse. It wasn't a question. We are, I said. Anya had come up the stairs, drawn by the noise. She looked at the pile, then at me, and simply nodded, ready for orders. The work was hard and precise. I directed them, my knowledge from a dozen engineering manuals I'd memorized guiding the construction. We set the steel frame, the metal groaning as we bolted it together. We installed the glass panes, creating a sealed environment. Anya, with her surprising dexterity, was a natural at the high-up work, moving along the beams with a dancer's balance. Chloe, following my instructions, helped lay out the complex network of hydroponic tubes and automated sprinklers. By late afternoon on the fourth day, it was done. A 1,500 square foot biocontained greenhouse stood on the roof, gleaming under the sun. Inside, UV lamps and a climate control system I had salvaged hummed quietly. It was an impossible structure in a dying world. I brought up the bags of soil and nutrient solution. Then, I reached into a pocket of my vest. I pulled out 3 small, vacuum-sealed foil packets. They were plain, with no markings visible to the naked eye. To me, the system interface projected text over them. I handed the first one to Chloe. Her hands were smudged with dirt. "What's this?" she asked. "Crimson Vigor tomatoes." I read the text only I could see, my voice flat. System description. Consuming 1 fruit provides a minor, non-stackable boost to strength and stamina for 1 hour. Hardy plant, high yield. Her eyes widened. She looked from the packet to my face. I handed her the second packet. Azure Mind Cabbage. Consumption increases the rate of mental energy regeneration by a small amount for 2 hours. Helps with focus. Her breath hitched. She understood the implication. Powers, abilities, they all cost something. A resource that needed to be replenished. This was not just food. It was a tactical asset. I held up the last packet. Golden Sun Corn. Each kernel contains a small amount of pure life energy. Accelerates natural healing. Works in synergy with healing abilities. I looked directly at her. Your healing hands will be more effective on anyone who eats this regularly. She looked down at the 3 packets in her hands as if they were holy relics. They were. I knew that in a year, major factions would wage wars for a single seed like these. I had dozens, collected from hidden quests and bugged merchants in my previous life. Get them planted, I said. This is your other responsibility now. You're the base doctor and the head farmer. She gave a short, sharp nod, her expression one of immense gravity. She clutched the seeds to her chest and walked into the greenhouse, her shoulders set with a new weight of purpose. I saw her power manifest as she knelt by the first planter bed, a faint green light glowing from her palms as she mixed the nutrient solution into the soil. The plants would thrive here. That night, I sat at the central command console in my study. The global leaderboard flickered on the main screen. 1. Landon, level 12, USA. 2. Kenta, level 9, JPN. 3. Valkyrie, level 9, GER. 4. Ivan, level 8, Russ. 5. Hector, level 8, Mex. Names were starting to appear. Strong people were carving out their own places in the chaos. The gap was still significant, but they were learning. They were adapting. It was a reminder that I was not the only player, just the one with a copy of the strategy guide. I switched the feed to the external cameras. The night was dark. A heavy rain had started to fall, lashing against the windows of the villa. The world outside was a mess of wind and water. Inside, the lights were steady. The air was a comfortable temperature. In the kitchen, Dr. Evans and Maria were cleaning up after dinner, their movements calm. In the infirmary, Chloe was reading a medical text under a bright lamp. On the roof, inside the greenhouse, the first tiny green shoots were already pushing up from the dark soil under the glow of the UV lamps. Anya was in the security room, a floor below me, her eyes on the monitor bank. Everything was under control. A piercing shriek cut through the low hum of the base. It was the perimeter alarm. Red lights strobed across my study, painting the walls in flashes of crimson. On the monitor, the camera feed I had been watching switched automatically to the source of the breach. Camera 8, the west wall. I was on my feet before the second wave of the alarm sounded. My heart didn't race, my breathing didn't quicken, an icy calm settled over me. The infrared display showed the chain link fence, shimmering with rain. The electric current flowing through it made it glow faintly in the thermal spectrum. A figure was on it. Small, wiry, it moved with a speed that wasn't normal, scrambling up the fence. A blue arc of electricity erupted as the figure's hand touched the live section. The figure convulsed for a second, then dropped back to the ground outside the wall, landing in a crouch. It didn't seem injured, and awakened. Anya's voice came over the intercom, clipped and clear. Hostile, west wall, trying to bypass the fence. I watched the screen. The figure wasn't trying to cut the fence or climb it again. It took a few steps back. It knelt, placing one hand on the waterlogged ground. The infrared camera flared white in a circle around the figure's hand. The water on the ground began to hiss, steam rising into the cold, rainy air even on the thermal display. The ground itself was heating up. The figure was cooking the earth, turning the mud into hard, dry clay. Trying to undermine the foundation of the fence post. Clever, but slow. I picked up the Eternal from my desk. The cool metal was a familiar weight in my hand. Anya, hold position. Keep eyes on it, I said into the intercom. I'll handle this. I walked out of my study, my boots making no sound on the polished hardwood floor. The red alarm lights washed over me as I headed for the door. An intruder was a problem. A problem to be erased. The red strobing lights did nothing to my heart rate. They were data, an input. The piercing shriek of the alarm was another. I moved through the hall, the cool grip of the eternal a point of focus in my palm. The intruder was a problem. One figure on the infrared feed, scrambling at the west wall, trying to turn the mud to solid earth. And awakened with a geothermal ability. Pointless but novel, a problem to be erased. I reached the security room. The door hissed open. Anya was already there, standing before the wall of monitors, her body a coiled spring. She didn't turn. Her eyes were locked on the main screen displaying the feed from camera 8. One hostile, she said. Her voice was flat. I looked past her at the screen. The small, wiry figure was still kneeling, pouring energy into the ground. A waste. The fence posts were sunk 10 feet deep into concrete footings. They could cook the ground for a week and accomplish nothing. Then, a flicker of movement at the edge of the infrared camera's range. And another. Not zombies. The signatures were too cohesive, the movements too directed. 5 more heat signatures, emerging from the collapsed skeleton of a strip mall 100 yards out. They moved in a loose, predatory formation. The situation changed. This wasn't a lone intruder. This was a chase. The figure at the wall, the geothermal one, must have sensed them. She scrambled to her feet, abandoning her foolish effort. She looked back, a panicked motion, then pressed herself flat against the chain-link fence, as if trying to become invisible. She was prey. My domain pulsed, a sense I felt in the bones of my skull. It was a cold, clear input, separate from sight or sound. The girl pressed against the fence, no malice. A frantic, desperate fear, but no hostility directed at my home. The 5 figures approaching, a greasy wave of avarice and cruel intent. They were the threat. Patch and audio from the west perimeter mic, I said. Anya's fingers danced across a keyboard. A faint crackle filled the room, overlaid with the hammering of the rain. The 5 figures closed the distance. They weren't running, they were stalking, enjoying themselves. One of them, the leader by his position in the center, stopped. He raised a hand, and his team halted. He lifted his head, his face a pale blob on the low-light camera. Hold up, his voice came through the speaker, tinny and distorted by the storm. Look at that. Bingo. He was looking directly at the villa, at the soft, warm light spilling from a few of my reinforced windows. My home was meant to be a fortress, but to a desperate man in the dark, any light was a lighthouse. What is it, boss? Another voice asked. The little bitch ran to a damn palace. Look at that place. Lights on. Clean walls. Somebody's living good in there, the leader chuckled. It was a wet, ugly sound. She just led us to a bigger score. A much bigger score. We take the girl, we take her toy, and then we take the whole fucking place. I watched the screen. The girl, she was just a girl, maybe 19 or 20, was frantically searching for a way over the fence. She was small, soaked to the bone, her thin jacket doing nothing against the downpour. She clutched a package to her chest, a roll of something wrapped in oilskin. Her treasure, the reason they were hunting her. The leader, the boss, raised his hand again. One of his men stepped forward, leveling a rifle. Not at the girl, at the camera mounted on the wall. He was a fool. Shooting the camera wouldn't blind me. It would only confirm his intent. But he didn't shoot. The boss put a hand on his shoulder. No, let's not make a racket. We do this quiet. Corner the rat, then kill the owner of the house. Rick, your eyes. See anyone on the walls? The one called Rick stepped forward. He closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, they seemed to glow faintly on the infrared display, a different temperature from the rest of his face. An enhanced vision ability. 2 on the roof, Rick said. No, wait, they're not people. Metal, look like gun barrels. Automated, my turrets. He'd spotted my turrets. Shit, okay, new plan, the boss said, his voice losing some of its cocky edge. We get the girl first. Use her to make them open the gate. Fan out. Box her in. They began to spread out, moving with a practiced coordination that spoke of many such hunts. The girl saw it. She gave up on the fence and started to run, skirting the edge of my property line, looking for another way in, a weak point that didn't exist. She was running out of time and space. I turned to Anya, the garbage in the back. Not the girl. Anya's eyes met mine in the reflection on the dark monitor. Her lips curved in a predator's smile that did not reach her eyes. Understood. Silent, I added. She nodded once, a sharp, bird-like motion. She turned and was gone from the room, melting into the corridors of the house. I watched her heat signature on a different monitor, a schematic of the villa's interior. She moved to the east wing, to a secondary exit that opened into a thicket of overgrown ornamental shrubs. I switched the main screen to a quad split, showing 4 different camera angles of the west perimeter. The girl was trapped now, her back to a solid section of the concrete wall where a decorative fountain once stood. The 5 men were closing in, forming a semicircle. They were taking their time, savoring it. Nowhere to run, little engineer, the boss called out, his voice carrying over the rain. Hand over the schematic, hand it over, and I'll make it quick. My boys are getting impatient. The girl shook her head, clutching the oilskin roll tighter. Her face was a mask of defiance and terror. Then I saw it, on camera 11, focused on the dark patch of woods behind the hunters. A flicker. Anya. She moved from one tree trunk to the next, a gray smear in the downpour. The storm was her ally. The wind masked any sound she made. Her body was low to the ground. The hunters were focused on the girl, their backs to the forest. Their arrogance was a fatal flaw. The rearmost man, one holding a crowbar, suddenly stiffened. His head snapped back at an unnatural angle. A dark shape, Anya's arm, was wrapped around his face. There was a sound, a muffled crunch, that the perimeter mic barely picked up. It was the sound of a neck breaking. He collapsed without a sound, a puppet with its strings cut. Anya was already gone, melting back behind a thick oak. One down. The 4 remaining hunters didn't notice. Their attention was fixed forward. Last chance, the boss said. Don't make me get my hands dirty. One of his men, the rifleman, shifted his weight. He seemed uneasy. He glanced over his shoulder. He saw nothing. He turned back. Anya emerged from the shadows directly behind another of the men, one on the far right of their arc. She didn't use a knife. Not yet. Her hand, holding a length of garrote wire scavenged from a piano, whipped around his throat. His eyes went wide. He tried to scream, but the sound was choked off, turning into a wet, rasping wheeze. His hands flew up to his neck, scrabbling at the wire. Anya put a foot in the small of his back and pulled. He went down, kicking, his boots drumming a frantic, dying beat against the mud. 2 down. Now they noticed. What the fuck? One of the remaining 2 yelled, spinning around. Where's Mike? Where's Jerry? The boss's head snapped around. His face was a mask of confusion. There. Something moved. Rick, the one with the enhanced eyes, stared wildly into the darkness. I can't see anything. The rain, it's like a wall. Anya was already on the move. She used their panic, their shouts, their divided attention. She burst from the cover of a dense bush, a blade now in her hand. My tenebrous crescent dagger. It drank the light. She was on the rifleman before he could bring his weapon to bear. There was no finesse. It was pure, brutal efficiency. The dagger went in under his jaw, driving up into the brain. He dropped the rifle. He took 2 steps back. He fell. 3 down. Shit. The last man, not the boss, fumbled for a pistol at his belt. He was terrified. He fired a shot, a wild, panicked bang that was loud even in the storm. The bullet went wide, chipping a piece of concrete from the wall, yards away from anything. That was all the time Anya needed. She flowed towards him, her movements a blur of lethal grace. The man's eyes were wide with terror. He tried to fire again, but she was too close. She slammed the pommel of her dagger into his wrist. I heard the bone snap on the audio feed. His gun clattered to the ground. He screamed, a high, thin sound of pain. Anya's second strike was with her empty hand, a rigid spear hand to his throat. He clutched his neck, his scream turning into a horrible gurgle. He staggered back, tripped over the body of the rifleman, and fell. 4 down. Just the boss remained. He stared, frozen, at the scene of carnage. His bravado had evaporated, replaced by stark, animal fear. His men were dead or dying in a circle around him, dispatched in less than 30 seconds. He looked from the twitching bodies to the darkness where Anya now stood, a silhouette against the storm. Who are you? He stammered. Anya didn't answer. She took a step forward. The boss did the only thing he could. He ran. He turned and sprinted back the way he came, slipping and sliding in the mud. He abandoned his prize, his ambition, his entire reason for being here. He just ran. I smiled faintly. Anya wouldn't let him get far. He was a loose end, and I didn't leave loose ends. I turned my attention back to the main screen. The girl, she was still pressed against the wall, watching the place where her pursuers had been. She had seen it all, the sudden, violent, and silent annihilation of the men who had hunted her. She slid down the wall, her legs giving out, and sat in the mud, the rain plastering her dark hair to her face. She looked at my house, at the fences, at the camera she knew was watching her. Hope, fear, and exhaustion warred on her face. Then, she finally succumbed, slumping sideways, unconscious. I watched her for a moment. A problem had been erased. A new variable had been introduced. My base was secure. My people were safe. My routine had been interrupted. I left the security room and took the elevator down to the ground floor. I walked to the main entrance, the heavy oak door I rarely use. I keyed in the code. The bolts slid back with a series of heavy clicks. I pulled the door open. The wind and rain lashed at me. The air was cold and smelled of wet earth and ozone. 30 feet away, the girl lay in a heap by the front gate. The rain was washing the grime from her face, revealing pale skin and delicate features. Even unconscious, her hand was clenched tightly around the oilskin-wrapped tube. My system interface highlighted it, projecting text that only I could see. Item detected. Rare schematic. Name. Automated Energy Sentry. Tier 1. Description. A blueprint detailing the construction of a basic defensive turret that fires concentrated plasma bolts. Requires a stable power source and a core focusing crystal. I looked from the text floating in my vision to the unconscious girl. Pity was a luxury I couldn't afford. Compassion was a liability, but utility was a resource. I strode out into the rain, the water beating on my tactical jacket. I reached the gate and knelt beside her. Her breathing was shallow. She was close to hypothermia. I reached down, not for her, but for the schematic clutched in her hand. Her fingers were locked tight. I paused. Then I sighed, a small puff of white vapor in the cold air. It would be faster to just bring her inside. I pressed a button on the gate's control panel. With a low hum, the heavy steel gate began to slide open. I looked down at the engineering student who had brought a wolf pack to my door, and who held the key to my next upgrade in her hand. Get in, I said to her unconscious form. It was time to upgrade the fortress. The heavy oak door slid shut behind me, the sound of the deadbolts locking a series of hard, final clicks that cut off the noise of the storm. Water dripped from the girl's thin jacket, forming a growing puddle on the polished marble floor. Her body was racked with shivers, a constant, violent tremor that made her teeth chatter. Her eyes, wide and dark, darted around the grand foyer, taking in the soft lighting, the dry air, the total absence of threat. I did not offer her a towel. I did not offer her comfort. I pointed to the oilskin tube she still clutched to her chest as if it were a vital organ. Give it to me, I said. My voice was flat in the large space. She flinched at my tone but complied. Her fingers, numb and white, fumbled to uncurl from the package. She held it out to me with a trembling hand. I took it. The oilskin was slick with rain, but the contents were dry. I unrolled it on a nearby mahogany table. The blueprint was drawn with precise, technical lines. Words and symbols glowed faintly in the dim light, visible only to me. Automated Energy Sentry, Tier 1 . I looked back at the girl. She was watching me, her fear a palpable thing, a cold radiation in the warm room. My name is Maya, she said, her voice thin. I was a grad student. Mechatronics. She hugged herself, trying to stop the shivering. My ability, I can understand and assemble machines. Any machine, as long as I have the parts and the plans. I nodded slowly. Utility. Valuable utility. Suddenly, a new sound intruded from outside. It was distorted, metallic, amplified by a cheap megaphone. Hey, inside the house. I know you've got the girl. I saw you drag her in. I walked past Maya, my boots silent on the rug, and entered the security room. She followed me, hesitantly, like a stray dog unsure if it would be fed or kicked. On the main monitor, a new group of figures was visible on the infrared feed. 8 of them. They were better armed than the first group, carrying assault rifles and wearing scavenged body armor. The one with the megaphone, a large man with a thick beard, stood just beyond the gate. He was the leader of the pack that had been hunting Anya's prey. He must have rallied his main force. My name is Cutter. We had a deal with that little bitch, and she ran. Send her out. Send out the schematic she stole. You do that, and we walk away. You've got a nice place here. Would be a shame if we had to burn it down. Maya stared at the screen, her face losing what little color it had. There were more of them, she whispered. I didn't know. I ignored her. My gaze swept over the schematics for the turret, then to the list of required components projected in my vision. High-tensile steel alloys, pre-war microprocessors, a core focusing crystal, gallons of conductive coolant. I walked to a wall panel and pressed my palm against it. A section of the wall slid away, revealing shelves stacked high with gray, metallic containers. My infinite backpack, with its contents sorted and ready. I began pulling out materials. The clang of heavy metal ingots hitting a steel cart echoed in the room. I retrieved a small, velvet-lined box and opened it. Inside, a fist-sized crystal pulsed with a soft blue light. A Tier 2 focusing crystal, looted from the hidden safe of a pre-apocalypse corporate CEO I knew about from my beta life. Overkill for a Tier-1 turret, but efficiency was everything. You have what you need, I said, wheeling the cart towards her. Build it, on the roof. Maya looked from the pile of raw materials to me, her expression a mixture of confusion and terror. Build it? Now? Here? There, right outside. That will take hours, maybe days. You have 5 minutes, I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. I pointed to a maintenance elevator in the corner of the room. That goes directly to the roof access point. Get to work. The megaphone blared again from the outside. I'm not a patient man. You have 4 minutes to make a decision before we help ourselves. We know you're in there. We see the lights. We know you've got women. My boys are getting anxious. Maya's jaw tightened. The raw, predatory threat in the man's voice seemed to flip a switch inside her. The shivering stopped. The fear in her eyes was replaced by a hard, focused anger. She gave me a single, sharp nod. She pushed the heavy cart towards the elevator, her small frame straining with the effort. I switched the security monitors, tracking her progress. The elevator door opened, and she disappeared inside. A moment later, the roof cameras showed her emerging into the driving rain. Without hesitation, she began to work. Her stated ability was an understatement. Understanding was not the right word. It was an innate communion. Her hands moved in a blur, a frantic, yet impossibly precise dance. She didn't consult the schematic. It was as if the design had been burned directly into her mind. A steel plate was lifted and locked into place. The sound of a high-torque wrench, manually operated, buzzed for a second. Bolts were seated, wires were connected, stripped, and plugged into a central processor with unerring accuracy. The heavy barrel of the weapon was mounted onto its gyroscopic stabilizer. The blue focusing crystal was slotted into the core chamber, which sealed with a pneumatic hiss. She worked amidst the pile of components like a master watchmaker, each movement economical and perfect, the storm whipping her hair around her face as she built a weapon of death piece by piece. 3 minutes. Cutter's voice boomed. His men were growing restless, shifting their weight, gripping their rifles tighter. They fanned out, taking cover behind the ornate stone pillars of the outer wall, ready to assault the gate. They thought they were in control. They thought time was on their side. I watched the turret assembly on one screen and the enemy positions on another. Anya's heat signature appeared beside me. She had changed into dry clothes, her presence as quiet as a shadow. She held her tenebrous crescent dagger, wiping a non-existent speck of dust from the black blade. 8 hostiles, she stated, her eyes on the monitor. Confident, arrogant, I corrected. On the roof, Maya was now connecting the main power conduits, her movements becoming faster, more urgent. Coolant flooded the system, the pipes frosting over for a second before returning to normal temperature. A sequence of lights on the turret's base flickered from red to yellow. 2 minutes. Last chance to send out the woman. We promise to be gentle. That's a lie, but at least you'll be alive. His men laughed. The sound was ugly and distorted through the speaker. Maya slammed the final maintenance panel shut. She scrambled over to a control console she had assembled first. She looked down, her fingers hovering over a large, green button. Her voice came through the comms, breathless and strained against the wind. It's ready. Power is stable. Targeting system is online. I just need to. 1 minute. I'm done talking. At the count of 10, we're breaching the gate. 10, 9, 8. Anya looked at me. I saw my own reflection in her dark, unblinking eyes. 7, 6, 5. On the rooftop camera, Maya looked toward the camera, awaiting the order. Her face was soaked, determined. She had built a fortress wall. Now she was waiting for permission to fire its first shot. 4, 3, 2. I leaned forward and pressed the transmit button on my console. Execute, I said. Maya's hand slammed down on the green button. On the roof, the turret did not roar. It did not explode into life. It simply acted. With a near-silent hum, the barrel swiveled, locking onto Cutter's position with instantaneous precision. For a fraction of a second, a thin, red targeting laser painted a dot on the center of his chest. Cutter never finished his countdown. A bolt of pure, white-hot plasma erupted from the turret's muzzle. It wasn't a bullet. It was a lance of contained sunlight that crossed the 200-meter distance in an instant. It moved with a quiet, lethal hiss that was swallowed by the storm. It struck Cutter in the chest. There was no impact. There was only deletion. His entire upper torso vanished in a flash of incandescent light and superheated steam. His legs stood for a full second, the megaphone still clutched in a hand that was no longer connected to anything, before they crumpled into a heap on the wet asphalt. The weapon that had been in his other hand clattered to the ground. Rain sizzled where his body had been. For a moment, his 7 men stood frozen. They stared at the spot where their leader had been. Confusion warred with disbelief on their faces. One of them took a hesitant step forward, then looked up at the roof of my villa. He saw the sleek, metallic form of the turret, its barrel still faintly glowing, swiveling slightly as it acquired its next target. The spell of their numbers, of their guns, of their bravado, was broken. The thing that replaced it was a raw, primal terror. One of them screamed. It was a high, thin sound. He dropped his rifle and ran. That was all it took. The pack scattered. They scrambled away in every direction, slipping in the mud, throwing their weapons aside, their only thought to get away from the silent, impossible weapon that had just erased their leader from existence. The turret didn't fire again. It tracked them for a moment, then its mission priority ended as they fled the perimeter. It retracted back into its armored housing on the roof with a soft mechanical whir. The show was over. In the security room, I watched them flee. Anya let out a small, satisfied sigh and sheathed her dagger. Maya's exhausted, relieved gasp came over the comms. I turned to look at her on the monitor. She was on her knees on the roof, her head bowed against the storm, her shoulders shaking not from cold, but from adrenaline and release. Then, a new notification appeared in my field of view. It was not from my local system. It was global, a blue text box, stark and unavoidable. Backquote, global warning. The first world event, the Sun's Wrath, will commence in 10 days. Backquote. Backquote, details. Atmospheric filters will degrade. Expect surface temperatures to reach 50 to 60 degrees Celsius, 122–140 degrees Fahrenheit. Water sources will evaporate rapidly. Heat-adapted creatures will become hyper-aggressive. Prepare accordingly. Backquote. The text faded. The world outside had just become infinitely more hostile. The panic that would be gripping billions right now was an irrelevant data point. For them, it was a death sentence. For me, it was a timer. I looked at the monitor showing Maya, now being helped to her feet by Anya, who had gone up to meet her. A doctor, a killer, and now, an engineer. The core was stabilizing, but the Sun's Wrath event would bring out new threats and new opportunities. My plan, my knowledge from the beta, unfolded in my mind. The coming heatwave would make one specific type of awakened power more valuable than all the gold left in the world. And I knew exactly where to find the strongest one. The equation of survival had new variables. The calculation produced a new result, a new destination, a new name to add to my roster. The air inside the villa did not move. A low hum, the sound of the central air conditioning unit, was the only constant noise. On the wall, a small digital panel glowed, 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Outside, the world was burning. I sat in a leather armchair. The glass in my hand was heavy and cool. Condensation dripped onto the coaster. Anya, her medic's kit neatly stowed on a side table, sipped orange juice. She watched the main security monitor with me. On the screen, the infrared camera feed showed the front gate. The image rippled, distorted by the waves of heat rising from the asphalt beyond the walls. Maya, the engineer, sat on the floor, cross-legged, methodically disassembling and cleaning one of the pistols from the armory. Her hands moved with a swift, practiced economy. She hadn't said a word in an hour. Beside her, Silas, the shadow specialist, was sharpening her crescent dagger on a whetstone. The rhythmic scrape of stone on steel was a soft, grating counterpoint to the hum of the AC. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Her eyes were also fixed on the monitors, which cycled through the perimeter cameras. The image was the same from every angle, a bleached white sky and a landscape baked to the color of bone. I reached for the remote on the mahogany table and pressed a button. A voice, frantic and broken by static, erupted from the built-in speakers in the wall. Repeat, this is not a drill. Stay indoors. Do not attempt to travel. The surface temperature on Interstate 85 is now 138 degrees. The asphalt is melting. We have multiple reports of vehicles igniting. For God's sake, if you have water, conserve it. Do not. A report just in. Riots have broken out at the municipal reservoir. Shots fired. Oh God, they're killing each other. The voice cut off, replaced by a high-pitched squeal of feedback. Then, another voice, calmer but strained. This is a broadcast from the Genesis Temple. Do not despair. The prophet tells us this is a trial by fire. A purification. We have water. We have sanctuary. Bring us your faith, bring us your labor, and we will give you life. The Genesis Temple is your only salvation. I pressed the mute button. The room fell back into the low hum of conditioned air and the scraping of Silas's blade. Maya paused her work. She looked at the spoon and the small, half-empty tub of vanilla bean ice cream beside her. We're low on chocolate, she stated, as if discussing ammunition reserves. Anya glanced at me. Her expression was neutral. She was making a report, not a complaint. I stood up. I didn't need to check the supplies. I knew what we had. My backpack was a universe of resources, but some things were finite even for me. More than that, this was an opportunity. A calculation. The heat that was killing the world was creating a perfect set of circumstances. I'm going out, I said. Maya looked up from her pistol components. The truck's cooling system is stable, but I can't guarantee it past an hour of continuous operation in this. The heat exchangers are working at 140% of designated capacity. It will be enough. I went to the garage. The modified Ford F-350 sat like a black beast in the cool, dim space. Maya had armor-plated it, installed run-flat tires, and, most importantly, cannibalized 3 separate industrial air conditioning units to create a self-contained climate system for the cabin and engine block. It was an ugly, utilitarian thing. It was perfect. I put on a cooling vest, a wide-brimmed hat, and dark goggles. The moment I opened the side door to the garage, the heat hit me. It was a physical wall. A solid, suffocating presence that stole the breath from my lungs. The air smelled of baked asphalt and dust. I climbed into the truck cabin and sealed the door. The internal AC blasted, and the wave of oppressive heat receded. The garage door groaned upwards, revealing a world seen through a furnace vent. The air shimmered violently. The ornate brick driveway looked soft, like it was made of clay. I put the truck in gear and rolled forward. The tires sank slightly into the asphalt of the street outside the gate, the rubber hissing. Driving was an exercise in navigating a warped reality. Buildings in the distance squirmed and bent in the heat haze. The road ahead was a river of shimmering mirages. Abandoned cars littered the streets, their paint blistered, their windows cracked. I saw a body sprawled on a sidewalk, skin dark and leathery, curled up like a dried leaf. There were no monsters, no zombies. The sun was a more efficient killer. My destination was the Riverside Industrial Park, a sprawling complex of warehouses and distribution centers. From my beta knowledge, I knew one of them, Frost T Fresh Logistics. A regional distributor of frozen goods. Their main cold storage facility, Building C, was a massive, windowless cube of insulated concrete with its own independent, diesel-powered generator and cooling system. Designed to keep 10,000 tons of ice cream frozen for 2 weeks without power from the grid. The park was deserted. The gates were open, swinging in a hot, dry wind. I drove past silent loading docks and empty parking lots. Building C was at the far end of the complex. The massive generator next to it was still thrumming, a deep, steady bass note in the scorching air. Someone had tried to break in. The main office door was splintered, but the reinforced steel door to the cold storage itself was untouched, save for some deep gouges in the metal. They had given up. I parked the truck at the loading dock, the flatbed aligned with the bay door. I got out. The heat was even worse here, reflected off the vast concrete surfaces. It felt like standing in an open oven. Sweat instantly soaked my shirt. I ignored it. I walked to the bay door, pulled the emergency release chain, and heaved. The heavy, insulated door rolled upwards with a series of loud clacks. A wall of frigid, white mist billowed out, so cold it felt like a physical blow. It smelled of freezer burn and artificial strawberry. I stepped through the mist and into the cold. The temperature difference was jarring. My skin prickled. My breath plumed in front of my face. The warehouse was cavernous, silent except for the hum of the giant cooling units high up in the darkness. Pallets stacked 6 high stretched away into the gloom, a city of frozen food. And it was all mine. I walked down the first aisle. Boxes of frozen pizzas, waffles, vegetables. I kept walking. The second aisle was nothing but meat. The third was the jackpot. An entire city block of ice cream. Tubs, bars, sandwiches, pints. Pallets stacked with tubs of vanilla, chocolate, strawberry. Crates of brand-name ice cream bars. A mountain of frozen sugar and fat, untouched. Further down, aisle after aisle of frozen juices and soft drinks. I unslung the infinite backpack. It wasn't a physical object I wore, more a function I could access. I placed a hand on the first pallet of chocolate ice cream tubs. They vanished. The pallet was now empty wood. I moved to the next one. And the next. Pallet after pallet of ice cream, frozen dinners, and juice concentrate disappeared into my storage. I worked with a cold efficiency, clearing aisle after aisle. I was a one-man locust swarm, stripping the shelves bare. There was no need to rush, but I wasted no time. As I took the last pallet from an aisle deep in the warehouse, a sound cut through the hum of the freezers. A cough. It was small, weak, barely audible. I stopped. The sound had come from deeper in, from behind the last row of shelving. I drew one of my eternal pistols. The weapon felt cool and solid in my hand. I moved slowly, my boots silent on the concrete floor. The cold in this part of the warehouse was more intense. Ice crystals a finger's length coated the metal racks. I rounded the last shelf, a stack of industrial-sized boxes of frozen French fries. There, wedged between the rack and the concrete wall, was a shape. It was curled into a tight ball, wrapped in the thin, flimsy uniform of a warehouse worker. The exposed skin on her hands and face had a bluish tint. A shivering tremor shook the small form. The most striking feature was her hair. It was pure white, like fresh snow, fanning out over the dusty floor. She coughed again, a dry, rattling sound. Her eyes fluttered open. They were a startling, pale blue, hazy with confusion and the slow, creeping numbness of hypothermia. She was freezing to death in the middle of a global heatwave. She looked at me, at the weapon in my hand. There was no fear in her eyes. Just a weary acceptance. This was her, the Ice Empress, the most powerful elementalist I knew of from my previous life, a woman who could create blizzards in the palm of her hand. Right now, she was just a girl dying in a freezer. My plan had focused on resources, on surviving the heat, but my knowledge had just presented me with a different kind of prize. A living weapon. Another calculation formed in my mind. The risk was zero, the potential reward was immense. I holstered my pistol. I stepped forward and knelt beside her. The cold seeping from the floor was sharp, biting. Her shivering was becoming weaker. She was an asset, and I never left a valuable asset behind.